Everything begins with a building bearing the sign Marlserol. Inside the building, a hanging bell sways gently, surrounded by mist. Shortly after, a warrior in armor and a cloak emerges holding the head of a dragon. He walks into a bustling bar, where a large screen displays a warning. Up close, the hilt of his sword reveals intricate details. A bartender then asks the warrior about his haul for the day. The man explains it was just a level 2 raid with rookies, pointing out that only the skin and fangs of the Fang Wolf had any value. He then asks if the event is starting. The bartender confirms as the two watch the screen. The screen then displays a message announcing the beginning of the massacre. People in an auditorium are informed that the voting has concluded. Next, a speaker announces there were 325 votes in favor, with no votes against or abstentions. He then proclaims that in the 7th year of the new calendar, Edition 001 of the Deprivation of the Mask has been approved. The President of Parliament, He Yao, begins to speak, mentioning the codename Mask and alleging evidence of massacres and wrongful imprisonment of over 30,000 people during the war. He adds that the accused also attacked citizens of allied nations, destroyed trade relations, and caused severe food shortages, stating the Supreme Council should have sentenced him long ago. The man seated hears the conclusion: the death penalty. The president explains that for having expelled alien invaders, he would only lose a few titles, such as leader and supreme marshal. He ends by stating that even so, the accused would retain his special title of hero. Furthermore, as the only special hero of the entire community, the protagonist would be unconditionally sent back to the battlefield and integrated into a unit if anything were to happen. At the bar, the broadcast continued to be watched by the crowd on the big screen. A man at the bar laments that if Mask hadn't fought enemies alone and helped during disasters, humanity might have gone extinct. Another present at the bar objected, saying the credit was collective and that Mask and He Yao were one and the same, while the young man next to him called him trash that needed to be eliminated. The bearded man recalled that even powerful heroes gave up during the catastrophe, but Mask saved the day, though he still believed that mutants persisted and humanity wasn't ready. He went on, saying that Mask even believed some of the community's heroes had been corrupted by unspeakable forces, daring to want to send them back to the dark times. The young man then suggested the protagonist was crazy or just wanted to return to the days when he held all the power and was admired. The bearded man, looking down, disagreed, seeming to ponder the real reason. Meanwhile, on stage, He Yao told Mask that he could leave with the honor of being a special hero, and that humanity would never forget his merit in the fight against the mutant. The president added that the treatment Mask was receiving was an exception to the law, given his previous crimes. The image focused on one of Mask's eyes, showing an impassive expression. The stage became empty, with only the podium lit by a bright spotlight. The protagonist, seated, had a thoughtful look. Suddenly, the man in the seat wondered internally what was happening. He asked himself if he hadn't died in a surprise attack by the Night Weaver Lord. The protagonist also wondered if that wasn't the place where he had been judged and betrayed by his companions. Reflecting, he thought it might be a memory before his death. Then the protagonist had a sudden realization. Before him, a holographic screen revealed a main task to rebuild humanity, offering two options. The first option, the hero's path, suggested that despite the new crisis and humanity's lack of understanding, he should protect them from the shadows. The second, the monster's path, brought a new crisis, rejected the idea of saving humanity, and considered regret something fit only for a useless monster. Finally, a warning stated that in 20 minutes, he would be randomly transported to an F-level environment. He quickly expressed surprise upon realizing he had been reborn. He looked around, noting he was once again at a historic crossroads. The protagonist made a decisive choice. He declared he would choose the path of the monster. He Yao asked Mask if his silence meant dissatisfaction with the verdict, admitting that, as a hero, he was unmatched. He then criticized him for lacking emotion and political wisdom as a leader, accusing him of blocking many people's interests, arguing that in recent years, the community had ruined Mask's prestige in society, claiming he was an obstacle to progress. He stated that the trial would serve to exile him completely. The speaker explained that from that moment on, he would become a harmless statue. One of the congressmen stated that if Mask dared to object, he would be nothing more than an ancient plague unwilling to give up power. The protagonist spoke up, declaring that he had an objection. A thunderous sound echoed through the courtroom. Then He Yao smiled, considering the objection a good sign. At the bar, the young man accompanying him exclaimed that the protagonist didn't want to give up his power. He questioned how many people had been sacrificed by the protagonist in his pursuit of power, stating that such a person deserved to be hanged for his crimes. On the large screen, the protagonist declared he was renouncing his title as a special hero. People at the bar reacted with surprise to the declaration. A hand slammed down hard on a surface. He Yao, visibly shocked, asked what he had just said. The protagonist repeated that he was giving up his title as a special hero. He declared that he was tired of being a hero. Then, the president questioned whether he was expressing dissatisfaction with the parliamentary resolution through such a petty attitude. The protagonist turned and asked, "Dissatisfaction?" He answered that he had no dissatisfaction and felt more relaxed than ever. Yao objected angrily, saying that it wasn't supposed to be this way, that he should live his life and honor as a silent hero supporting all humans. He asked whether the protagonist intended to use his strength alone to fight against the community, demanding that he couldn't just walk away like that, while the protagonist asked if there was anything else. Yao stated that since the protagonist had renounced his special hero status, he should not keep his power. The young man at the bar asked his friend what the council president meant by that. His friend replied by asking if he couldn't understand something so obvious. The young man exclaimed that Yao wanted to abolish Mask's power, and a third person, who had remained silent until then, asked how the title had been abolished. A woman then asked what the rank of hero Mask was. The bearded man replied that Mask was rank 13, 4 levels above Yao, who was in second place. He added that, except for Mask, no one had ever reached beyond the 10th level, and he didn't believe anyone ever would. On stage, Yao, furious, stated that the protagonist was only there thanks to the community's resources and everyone's sacrifices. He said the protagonist could reject his identity, but not the spirit of the community, calling his attitude a disgrace to all. He continued, affirming that if the protagonist wanted to leave, he would have to give up all his power. The protagonist questioned whether he really had to surrender all his power. Everyone watched, surprised by the demand. Then he accepted the condition. He raised a blue energy sphere, declaring that he would surrender it. The energy sphere in his hand began to intensify. One person in the audience reacted in shock. The energy surged upward, unleashing a burst of blue light. A vast amount of energy enveloped the protagonist. All the congressmen bowed under the pressure of the energy. One of them cried out for help, struggling against the force. Yao struggled to endure it, recognizing the immense power. The president, a rank 9 hero, had to use all his strength. He fought to resist the urge to kneel before the protagonist. Surrounded by blue energy, he declared that if they wanted it, he would give it back. A powerful column of blue energy burst from the ground. The energy rose with great intensity, forming a luminous pillar. The beam of light struck the top of a building. In the city, people watched the mysterious phenomenon, wondering what it was. Others reacted in panic, warning that a king-class monster had descended and people should seek shelter. Blue lightning spread across the night sky, connecting the building to the horizon. The energy's force spread across the ground, causing tremors. The congressmen in the audience were either collapsed or struggling to stand. The protagonist stood tall, wielding the blue light energy. Yao, on the ground, expressed surprise that he had endured 10 minutes before the power was released, but he raised his head, a satisfied smile on his face, proclaiming that Mask was now just an ordinary human. He declared that as just an ordinary human, there was no longer any reason to fear him. The protagonist looked at his hand pensive. Finally, he walked away from the ruined place, leaving the past behind. Yao smiled, encouraging him to move on. The protagonist removed his mask, tossing it aside. Then he ordered him to leave, stating that his death would happen soon. The protagonist walked toward a door, leaving a trail of energy on the ground. Suddenly, an intense beam of red light erupted from the floor. Yao reacted with shock, questioning how he could simply vanish. Meanwhile, a screen indicated that the random teleportation had been activated, sending the protagonist to a level 4 secret realm, the brood nest of the mother spider. A glowing blue energy portal shone brightly at the entrance of a rocky cave. Then a foot stepped into the light, and a loud voice caught everyone's attention. Emerging from the portal, a group of fighters entered a level 3 realm, where the leader explained they would face level 3 spider guards, considered easy for their level 2 squad. Additionally, the captain mentioned having heard that the monsters were human-sized spiders and asked if anyone there was afraid of such creatures. Comforting her teammate, one of the women calmed Xiao Qian, who quickly claimed she wasn't afraid. At that moment, one of the men asked the captain to stop joking and move on, saying he needed money for monster hunting, and another agreed. Continuing the conversation, they also talked about the Judgment Day of Mask, regretting they couldn't watch it live, though one suggested watching the broadcast at home was just the same. Soon, the woman added that the secret realm was only available because many other professionals had gone to watch the Judgment live, and the man agreed. Then the captain ended the conversation, declaring it was time to head out. With that, he ordered everyone to work together to explore the secret realm as quickly as possible, receiving agreement from the team. Suddenly, the portal behind them reacted with a swirling sound. They immediately turned around, questioning if someone else was coming through. Slowly, a foot descended from the portal, glowing intensely. One of the women visibly showed surprise at the scene. Finally, a man fully emerged from the portal, surrounded by a luminous aura. Amazed, the other fighters wondered why the newcomer had entered the secret realm without any gear or weapons. Next, he observed the place, commenting that he had forgotten what lower-level secret realms were like. Feeling nostalgic, he remembered the last time he had come to a place like that, when he became a professional. He also recalled a secret realm that, if not resolved in time, would become real, a place feared even by monsters, and that he had once faced an unnamed demon god there. After losing all his power and returning to level 1, the system had sent him there, as shown on his status screen. Looking at it, he analyzed the details of his current condition displayed on the screen. Still, he reflected that although the outcome of this choice was uncertain, in his previous life, the hero's path had failed to save humanity. With a look of anticipation, he thought of becoming a cold-blooded monster. Suddenly, the captain approached the newcomer, asking if he was also there to raid the secret realm. Curious, he asked where the young man's weapon was. In response, the boy clenched his fist, declaring that this was his weapon. With that, the captain understood he was a martial artist, someone who used his body as a weapon, saving on equipment. Curious, he asked the young man's level, thinking he must be confident to enter a level 3 realm, but also worried he might split the rewards. Plainly, the young man answered that he was level 1. Immediately, the group reacted with surprise and shock at hearing level 1. In disbelief, the captain asked if the boy was joking. He then mocked the idea of a level 1 professional wanting to die there and cursed, admitting the boy had scared him. In response, the young man pushed the captain's hand off his shoulder. With determination, he stated he was there to crush monsters. Then one of the men laughed, saying that with level 1 strength he wouldn't even beat their level 2 healers, and advised him to wait for the exit to reopen or he'd die there. The young man calmly replied that he wouldn't bother them. Finally, the captain declared he wouldn't stop him if he wanted to die, but warned that when danger came, he shouldn't expect them to help. Soon after, the group moved on, and the captain told them to keep going, while the young man remained still. Curiously, Shao Kahn looked back at him. Suddenly, the other woman launched a fire blast at something. As a result, a monster exploded under the impact of the spell. Next, the archer warned the captain to be careful and fired an arrow. Quickly, the captain dodged a monster as the arrow struck it. Grateful, the captain thanked for the help. Fiercely, the fighters battled the monsters, determined to wipe them out. Meanwhile, the young man watched the fight from a distance. Soon after, the lady approached and commented that Captain Song's attitude had been rather friendly. Trying to comfort him, she asked not to take it seriously, explaining that he meant well and that a rookie could easily make mistakes in a secret realm. Moreover, the girl warned that carelessness could lead to death. In response, he agreed that today's professionals were more progressive and cautious, seeing it as painful lessons learned, which was gratifying. Surprised, Shao Qian noted that despite being young, he spoke like influential people from the Commonwealth. She added that the hero mask policy, by reinforcing training and cooperation, had reduced the death rate among low-level professionals and encouraged the emergence of new talent. At that moment, the girl realized she had forgotten to introduce herself. She promptly introduced herself as Yan Kanshin, a level 2 healer. They then shook hands. In turn, he introduced himself as Xiao Qiu, a level 1 professional who had not yet chosen a class. Perplexed, Kanshin showed surprise upon learning he hadn't selected a class. Calmly, Xiao Qiu said he was still thinking about it, as he himself had created all of humanity's professional classes: ranged combat, melee, magic, and others. Yan Chanshin advised him to test his spirituality and follow the path of a caster, since his constitution wasn't ideal for close combat, and that would keep him away from the front lines and injury. Attentively, she stared at him with wide eyes. Embarrassed, she then apologized, asking if she had spoken too much. Suddenly, something approached rapidly from above. Startled, Yan Chanshin reacted in confusion as she was pulled by the young man. Next, a purple spike came down right where they had been. Quickly, he shielded her from a second spike that struck the ground. Soon, the archer shouted, identifying the attacker as a shadow spider. With that, a giant shadow spider revealed itself, while the two were safe. At that moment, the young man's hand began to glow with energy. Then he grabbed the creature's leg. With force, he squeezed the monster's leg, causing it to gush purple fluid. Holding the monster's broken leg in his hand, he was still supporting the girl. He then prepared to attack, using the leg as a weapon. The young man then crushed the monster with its own leg. The giant monster displayed injuries and emanated a dark energy. Xiao Qiu and Chanshin watched the monster, which still remained at a distance. The archer expressed surprise at the opponent's body mastery, and another nearby added that it was really too much. Then, the spearman denied that professional martial artists could achieve such a feat. He had crushed the spider's most vulnerable joint and pierced its eye in an instant. Someone commented that the victory came from understanding both the monster and his own body, relying solely on skill to fight on another level. The young man then asked if she could let go as the danger had passed. He added that he was about to be suffocated by her grip. Embarrassed, she covered her face and apologized immediately. Further ahead, Xiao Qiu noticed that choosing the monster's path hadn't affected his leveling system, with the screen displaying the experience points gained. He reflected that the leveling system removed barriers, allowing one to grow stronger by killing monsters. This was what had helped him become a hero in his past life. He expressed confidence that with this function and his past battle experience, he would grow even faster. The captain then acknowledged that he was extraordinary for having dared to challenge the secret realm alone, and that he had underestimated him. He thanked him for saving his ally and promised that at the end of the mission he would receive his share of the reward. However, the young man replied that it had merely been a gesture, and that helping each other in the secret realm was the right thing to do. The captain felt that he was acting deliberately, while still confirming the young man's attitude. A line of red light cut through the air. Then he took position, brandishing his sword to begin the attack. The adventurers were surrounded by fallen monsters as they analyzed the area. Soon, the leader stated that the area boss should be ahead. He explained that after that battle, they could return to the real world, and the plan was the same. He would draw attention while the others dealt damage. He instructed the mage to prepare her fire spell to burn the spider's silk, to which she assured him she would take care of it. The archer commented on how the day was progressing and that the trial of the century might be ending, but another cut him off, blaming the hypocrite mask. The archer expressed curiosity about what the masked one looked like, since no one had ever seen him without the mask. The mage mentioned rumors that the masked one might be a woman. With her head lowered, she revealed that she used to support him and saw him as a savior, but he had massacred everyone in the city of Chuga. Hearing that, Kanshin tried to ease the situation, saying there was no need to speak that way. She argued that an infectious demon had descended upon the city, turning people into monsters, and that the masked one acted as a last resort. The Lancer confronted her, asking if she was still defending him and whether she might be a paid actress from the internet, but she quickly denied the accusation. The captain intervened, declaring the matter closed. He smiled at Xiao Qiu, asking the others if they wanted to turn the situation into a comedy for the boy. He then called them forward, saying it was time to challenge the boss. The cave extended ahead, covered in thick spider webs. A foot stepped onto the webs, breaking them gently. The Lancer remarked that the environment looked like a bossed area and speculated about valuable materials once the boss was defeated. The archer expressed interest in the boss chest, while the mage commented that the monster's body was worth more than a professional's salary. A monstrous leg emerged from the webs, signaling the boss's arrival. The captain then warned that the monster was approaching. The giant monster charged toward him, and he braced for the impact. Assuming his indestructible stance, he declared he would draw the creature's attention so the others could deal damage. He then collided with the creature in a thunderous impact. The Lancer jumped onto the monster, launching his own attack. He struck the creature with his spear, hitting it with force. Xiao Qiu observed the battle, noticing that the monsters in this low-level secret realm had little intelligence. Clenching his fist, he indicated that with the right approach, they could win. He then punched, cracking the monster's carapace, showing that the fight could be resolved quickly. The mage unleashed a powerful stream of fire at the creature, while the archer readied himself beside her. The monster was engulfed in flames, and its shell began to crack under the intensity of the attack. Qianqin, in turn, conjured a green energy technique, hitting their ally. The monster finally gave in, completely consumed by the fire. Victorious, the captain exclaimed that with proper teamwork, they could clear a level 3 secret realm without injuries. He then announced he would distribute the final rewards using the same ratio as before, remembering to include the new member. Xiao Qiu questioned it, since the system had indicated that it was a level 4 secret realm, not level 3. However, what was even stranger was that the secret treasure chest hadn't appeared, as another soon noticed. The mage looked ahead, realizing there was something more in view. A bare foot landed softly on the ground. Suddenly, a figure in a school uniform with long hair, but no head, emerged, startling them. The mage expressed shock upon noticing the absence of the figure's head. They looked at the back of the figure, seeing that an astronaut helmet replaced the head. The captain said the secret treasure chest hadn't appeared earlier because something was wrong. He finally understood, stating that the girl was the true boss of the secret realm. The Lancer found it strange that she was the boss, saying she wasn't even scary and that the previous monster felt more threatening. The red eyes in the helmet glowed intensely. The figure leaned forward as her hair flowed. Suddenly, she dashed forward at high speed. The Lancer prepared himself, pointing his spear at the figure. He charged at the girl, intending to stop her. The archer shouted to his teammate, warning that such a direct attack would be easily dodged. However, the figure was struck in the chest by an unexpected attack, releasing a burst of purple energy. The girl's figure was hit by Lao Qi, who pierced her with his spear. Meanwhile, Xiao Qiu and the others watched the scene with serious expressions. Lao Qi, with a satisfied smile, commented that the situation seemed easy to handle. He then advanced again, yelling for the figure to die. The attack pierced the girl's abdomen, forming a hole and emitting a strange energy. Next, glowing purple webs began to emerge from her wound. Lao Qi tried to understand what was happening as the energy threads wrapped around his body. The Lancer tried to resist, begging them to wait. Caught in the webs, he let out a scream of pain. The archer, in desperation, shouted Lao Qi's name. The captain warned that those spider silk threads couldn't be cut by physical attacks and ordered the mage to use a fire spell. The mage got ready, focusing her energy and summoning flames in her hands. Soon after, the girl was hit again by a powerful fire attack. The leader pleaded for them to save Lao Qi quickly, saying they couldn't let him be caught in the flames. The archer watched the fire, trying to process what he was seeing. The flames spread, filling the area with their intensity. However, the figure of the girl with the extra leg remained unmoved in the center of the firestorm. Lao Qi, still trapped, was visibly affected by what he saw. The creature, showing no sign of injury, rose amidst the flames. The captain expressed his astonishment, stating he had never seen a boss like that. Lao Qi screamed as the spider silk tightened around him, and the flames struck him. A swift foot moved in a precise strike. The spearman sensed the imminent danger. Lao Qi was violently struck from behind. The boss stood beside Lao Qi, who was gravely wounded by the webs and the blow. The archer, enraged, shouted his name and swore to kill the boss. Xiao Qiu held him back, warning him not to act recklessly. He explained that with the power the monster had shown, he wouldn't end up any better than the fallen spearman. The archer grumbled in frustration, while the captain agreed there was no chance of victory and a rushed attack. Alert, he asked how long it would take for the Secret Realms portal to open, and the response was 3 hours. He then stated that they could only fight while retreating, planning a strategic withdrawal to the entrance and an immediate escape as soon as the portal opened. The archer warned that the boss was approaching, watching the figure move closer while Lao Kai lay wounded on the ground. The boss, her glowing red eyes shining, moved rapidly toward them, revealing multiple legs. She launched a new wave of luminous energy webs at the group. The captain extended his arm, feeling the energy webs lash against his defense. The archer readied his bow, shouting the captain's name in alarm. But at the same time, energy webs gushed from the monster's body in response. The energy webs intertwined with the arrows, deflecting them in midair. The archer was caught by the energy webs, which held him tightly. The captain, also tangled in some webs, shouted the archer's name. The boss charged mercilessly at the archer, who was helpless in the webs. Something emerged from her body. A sharp claw extended from the boss's body among the webs. The archer let out a cry of anguish, his face twisted in fear. Drops of blood splattered through the air. Kanshin covered her eyes in shock, while the mage brought her hand to her mouth, both horrified. The boss held the archer, revealing a horrific scene. The archer's body fell to the ground, leaving a trail around it. The captain, sword in hand, expressed his frustration with the situation. The boss moved with astonishing speed, dodging the captain's strike with a wave of energy. The energy exploded at the point of contact between the sword and the boss's defense. The captain showed surprise, murmuring that it was impossible. He questioned how, being a level 3 swordsman, a level 4 monster could remain unharmed after he had used all his strength. Despite the shock, he hardened his expression, still struggling against the webs that held him. The boss advanced, thrusting her pointed abdomen toward the captain, declaring that it was all over. Desperate, he heard someone shout for the sword to be handed over. Xiao Qiu extended his hand, stating that the only way to survive was to cut the arm, and asked for the sword if he wanted to live. The captain was sweating, staring at his trapped arm with a conflicted expression. With his eyes closed, he seemed to make a painful decision. The captain's sword was thrown to the side. Then Xiao Ku ran swiftly, grabbing the sword. His foot struck the ground with determination. The young man raised the sword as he leaped. He then struck the leader's arm, freeing him from a terrible fate. The captain let out a cry of shock and pain after losing a limb. Inside the cave, the creature stood in an altered form. Exiting, Xiao Qiu carried the wounded captain out of the place. Meanwhile, Chanshin prepared a healing spell, relieving the leader's pain. Soon after, the mage voiced her despair, saying she didn't want any of that. She then ran, saying she didn't want to die in that place. Then Kanshin asked Xiao Qiu why he wasn't running, with the captain still on the ground. He explained that the creature was intentionally allowing the woman to escape. He added that the fear released by a fleeing human made the meal more satisfying for her. He continued, saying that the God-chosen beasts enjoy human negative emotions the most. For them, fear, jealousy, and resentment were delicacies. Kanshin, surprised, asked about fear and the ones chosen by God. He soon clarified that they were monsters chosen by the outer gods of the void. Once blessed, they gained terrifying growth, speed, and power, along with bizarre appearances. He claimed to have already killed countless of these God-chosen ones. The first secret realm he ever entered assigned him one of those monsters, and he concluded that the system had poor taste. The creature with spider legs lay on the ground, shrouded in purple smoke. Then, the purple smoke began to concentrate. Kanshin cried out in concern. She then attempted to cast a poison repulsion spell. Meanwhile, the mage affected by the smoke seemed to be under its control. She was paralyzed, her eyes turned white, completely overtaken by the influence. Kenshin realized it wasn't poison gas, but spiritual pressure. The spider creature remained in place, surrounded by the smoke. Its red eyes glowed intensely. Xiao Qiu questioned the creature, asking if it was confused that he hadn't fainted like the others. As he walked forward, he said that although he was only level 1, his spiritual power was level 14. He then asked if her spiritual pressure had weakened. He proceeded to walk through the smoke. Xiao Qiu revealed he had gained a new skill, activating his monster status. He thanked the creature for knocking out the others, which allowed for a serious fight. In his transformed form, he said the creature should feel honored to witness his existence. In his final form, he repeated that it should be proud. The creature continued releasing even more energy. He knelt down, assuming a combat stance. His transformed face showed intensity. He charged forward at high speed. Before him stood the helpless boss. She tried to attack him with her long legs. Unfortunately, it was useless as she was struck back by a counterattack from him, leaving her unable to react. With one hand, he grabbed one of the creature's long legs. If she had 8 legs before, now she had 7. Letting go, he commented that although it was long, it was a good leg. Right after, the creature released even more web-like energy from her body. Before being hit, he jumped swiftly. Mocking the creature, he said she only had one basic move and was a failure. He added that perhaps he had too many expectations for a god-chosen being of level 4. If her level were higher, things might have been different. He concluded that he wouldn't let her live to reach a higher level. Then he prepared for the final blow. He struck the spider creature with a crushing attack, finishing her off with a devastating strike. The spider creature was destroyed, with several of her legs torn off. Holding the creature's legs, he declared there was only one left. Strangely, the creature felt fear of him. With her only remaining leg, she tried to run. Unfortunately, she lost her last leg as well. Finally, she collapsed on the ground with no legs left. She tried to crawl away to escape. Her red eyes were still glowing intensely. Standing before her, he asked if she hadn't imagined her end would come so soon. He raised his foot for the final strike and simply told her to die. He then stomped on the spider creature's head, destroying it completely. The system screen displayed, "Raid complete. Mother Spider Nest, Level 4 Secret Realm." A mission reward, Spider Lake, was granted. The survivors would automatically be transported out of the secret realm. The scene shifted to a bustling city. Kenshin thought that even though 2 hours had passed since the teleportation, it all felt like a dream. After waking from the coma caused by spiritual pressure, they were transported out of the secret realm, and the captain, severely injured, was taken to the hospital. However, Xiao Qiu hadn't been seen since the beginning, and she wondered if he had died. Suddenly, she was surprised. She spotted Xiao Qiu standing in the distance in front of a sign. The city appeared under a bright, sunny blue sky. After leaving the secret realm, Xiao Qiu arrived in Da City, thinking about finding a place to live and settle down. However, upon seeing rental ads, he realized that even a small apartment cost a lot per month. He reflected that in his previous life, he never had to worry about money because others handled everything for him. As he thought about how hard it was to live in human society without understanding money, he heard someone call them. He turned his head, surprised. Then he asked the girl if she was the healer from the secret realm. On the other hand, she questioned herself about being called a healer. Soon after, the girl introduced herself as Yan Cixi, emphasizing the spelling of her name and asking him to remember it. And finally, she expressed relief to see him safe. She then asked if he was looking for a place to stay, and Xiao Qiu confirmed, saying he had no family or friends in the city. She seemed to understand his situation. Da City, only 40 years old, had been built after the disaster. However, with rapid urbanization, the old central area of the city had turned into an urban village. They stopped in front of a house, and Yan Cixi said it was hers. She reassured him, saying there was a separate room for him without any inconvenience. Noticing a medal on the wall, Xiao Qiu asked about it, and she explained it was her father's retirement honor. Proudly, she described her father as a hero and soldier, level 5, far more powerful than she was, with many battles under his belt. Additionally, she excitedly shared that her father had fought side by side with Mask, even sharing meals with him. However, she confessed that she didn't know if her father's story was true, since he had been telling it since she was a child. Thinking it over, she figured it might be a lie, as her father drank a lot and it was unlikely that Mask would have interacted with a low-ranking officer. Then Xiao Qiu asked about her father, and she replied, sadly, that he had passed away. The war had made him suffer too much, healing his wounds but draining his vitality, and he died shortly after leaving the army. Xiao Qiu then asked about her mother, and Yan Cixi explained that she died while giving birth to her sister. Upon hearing this, Xiao Qiu simply nodded, his expression sorrowful. However, Yan Cixi smiled, telling him not to worry, as it had been a long time and she was doing fine. She then invited him inside the house. Inside, she stepped away to get a blanket, reminding him that personal clothing would be his responsibility. Next, she showed him a room in the left wing, saying it was old, but empty and available for him. To Xiao, that place was much better than the front lines, and he planned to pay rent with the money he earned in Secret Realm. Suddenly, the sound of a wheelchair approached. Then a girl in a wheelchair asked who the newcomer was. Yan Cixi explained that it was Xiao, a companion from a secret realm who would be staying with them. However, Canli questioned how a stranger could be called a companion. With sarcasm, she commented on her sister's attitude in bringing a stranger home. Right after that, she turned her chair and rolled away. Yan Cixi apologized, explaining that she was a good girl but got nervous around strangers. Additionally, the girl mentioned that Qianli's attitude was because of the Judgment Day of Mask, which she had idolized since childhood. Xiao, for his part, thought he didn't expect to have so many fans. Meanwhile, Qianli was in her room, focused on her computer. On the screen, comments were attacking Mask, questioning whether he had thrown away humanity's powers and resources, calling him a coward and a hypocrite. Enraged, Qianli called the critics fools, defending that Mask had never taken resources, or rather helped them survive dark times. As her anger grew, she slammed her fingers furiously on the keyboard, calling them fools again. At that moment, Yan Cixi called her sister for dinner. Qianli replied that she was busy and didn't want to eat, but her sister insisted she come out, since they had a guest. Angrily, she asked why that man was a guest, and if he thought he was masked to demand her presence. Yan Cixi sighed and accepted her sister's refusal. At the dinner table, Yan Cixi apologized for the simple meal, explaining that it would just be the two of them. Xiao, in turn, assured her that the food was very good as he ate. He recalled past times when he ate unseasoned monster meat without rice on the frontier, which tasted like metal and had a strange bitterness. Back then, he felt that any food became acceptable, as long as he was fighting the darkness for humanity. While they ate, the television displayed a news report where a reporter asked Professor Zhang for his opinion on Mask's disappearance. The professor said the parliament had its reasons and that citizens should trust them, but mentioned there was a theory circulating online. According to him, the theory was that Mask had fled from his crimes, and that renouncing his powers was just a performance, since without power he could disappear in public. The reporter reflected that it was just a theory and couldn't be true, to which the professor agreed. He also mentioned pessimistic opinions, questioning whether Mask's disappearance would affect peace, since he had made great contributions. Professor Zhang found the idea of self-destruction ridiculous, stating that humanity's victories came from collective effort and parliamentary leadership, not from one person alone. Additionally, he emphasized that the excessive mythologizing of one person was undesirable, wrong, and unfounded. The professor's speech continued on TV, comparing humanity to the sun, which would continue to spin even without Earth, and would thrive without Mask. Yan Cixi then asked if it was true that Mask had fled from a crime. Noticing that Xiao was already eating his fourth bowl, Yan Cixi expressed surprise at how fast he ate and asked for his opinion. Still eating, he replied that Mask's behavior was what the news said, fleeing from his crimes and other bad things. Yan Cixi was shocked, defending that Mask must have had his own reasons for acting that way. Xiao replied, maybe, which made her call him cold, asking if he didn't care about Mask, and he said he didn't. The girl imagined that if Qianli saw the program, she would probably break the TV. Suddenly, loud noises came from outside, with a threatening voice asking if they thought they'd be safe hiding there. Yan Cixi recognized that they were people from the company Kejing Investments, which left her intrigued. Soon after, the door was struck forcefully as a voice threatened to burn the house down. Yan Cixi ran quickly with a worried look. Then her hands opened a large door, revealing the light outside. Upon opening the door, a man mocked her, saying it was rare to see her around. However, Yan Cixi made it clear that she wouldn't sell their house. Next, Tujing asked if she didn't understand the situation, now that her team had disbanded. He also boasted that, as clients of the company, it was easy to know everything. Likewise, he asked what she planned to do now that she had no one left to rely on. In response, Yan Cixi remained silent, simply observing the man's insolence. Tujing then said he'd give her and her sister 5 more days to think. After all, he was offering 100,000 federal dollars for her to hand over the land to the company. Yan Cixi was immediately shocked by the amount, questioning the price drop. In response, Tujing laughed and explained that the real estate market wasn't fixed and such changes were normal. Additionally, he mocked her, saying he knew she had little money to treat her sister. Suddenly, he looked behind her, noticing Xiao approaching. Curious, Tujing asked if he was her boyfriend, surprised by her taste for younger guys. He then extended his hand, saying it was a pleasure to meet him, and introduced himself as the head of Kejang's security department, asking for future guidance. Soon after, Xiao extended his own hand, accepting the handshake. Thus, the two clasped hands in a firm grip. At that moment, Yan Cixi shouted for him to be careful, warning that Tu Jiang was a mage specialized in mental attack. However, the handshake had already been made. As soon as the connection formed, Tu Jiang smiled victoriously, thinking he had succeeded. Then, a vibrant aura of energy surrounded the two. Suddenly, Xiao Ku's face showed a serious expression, with a pulsating energy around him. Moments later, a pink energy tear ran from his eye. Meanwhile, inside what Tu Jiang believed to be Xiao Ku's mental world, he laughed loudly, sure that the boy's mind would shatter. He continued laughing, saying he'd only make him faint and spend half a month bedridden. However, he quickly realized something was wrong, asking himself what was happening. His eyes widened in shock, his face filled with disbelief. He was floating above an expanse of calm, dark water, wondering if this was really Xiao Ku's mental world. Completely stunned, he exclaimed that no human could possess such powerful mental strength. Desperate, he tried to escape, declaring that he needed to get out of there. But his face was full of panic and sweat as he realized the gravity of the situation. At that moment, a massive wave rose above him, about to swallow him whole. Next, he fell into the water, plunging into the churning depths. Angrily, he thought that Xiao Ku was on another level, completely beyond him. Submerged in the water, he panicked, realizing he'd been engulfed by mental power. His eyes showed fear and sweat as the water surrounded him. In the depths of the mental abyss, Tu Jiang saw a threatening red symbol in the sky. Terrified, he screamed that it was a monster. Back in reality, another thug tried to shake Tu Jiang, calling him repeatedly. Confused, Yan Sixu wondered if the man was trying to blackmail them now that brute force had failed. Furious, the man glared at Xiao Q, accusing him of doing something. Zai grabbed him firmly by the arm, stopping him from moving forward. Curious, the man asked why he was being held back and was told to use his head. Tu Jing had ended up like that after messing with the boy. Then he stated that Xiao Q was stronger, maybe even a level 3 professional, capable of taking down their leader. Thus, the man holding Tu Jiang admitted they had underestimated Yan Sixi, seeing she had such strong backup. Zai, in turn, warned that if he dared attack anyone again, things wouldn't end well. Surprised, Yan Sixi asked Xiao Q if he had made Tu Jiang faint. In response, he explained that he hadn't intended to act, but the guy had insisted on entering his mental world. Xiao Q then asked if they had been bothering her for a long time. Yan Sixi explained that it started about 4 years ago, after her father died, and they tried to buy the house. She added that since they didn't need to sell to survive, they had invaded the home and even threatened her sister, Qianli, when she wasn't around. Fortunately, she became a level 2 professional, and with secret threats from Captain Song, they had stopped harassing them. However, she regretted that they started bothering them again right after the captain's accident. Curious, Xiao Qiu asked about the government, since descendants of soldiers were supposed to receive preferential treatment. In response, Yan Sixi questioned what that preferential treatment even meant. If it really worked, they wouldn't be there. She explained that the government preferred to treat those who brought wealth well, like the Keijian Corporation, rather than people like her. Thoughtfully, Xiao Qiu simply muttered, "Yeah, true." Later, while washing the dishes, Yan Sixi said he didn't need to do that. In return, he said that someone had taught him to show gratitude, and since he ate and stayed there, it was right to help. Grateful, she admitted that he had been a great help, and she didn't know what she would have done without him. Then she asked about his plans, whether he would join other teams to raid secret realms. She said she hoped Captain Song would wake up soon, otherwise she would have to find another reliable team. She also explained that teams in secret realms compete and could even betray each other. Although federal law forbade killing in secret realms, Xiao Qiu considered that no one actually monitored things in there. Because of that, Yan Sixi promised that if she found a reliable team, she would recommend him. He simply replied okay, but thought to himself that ever since he had become a monster, he knew no one could fight by his side. Suddenly, a vibrant red aura flared around him. Immediately, a screen appeared before him with a new task. Invade the level 4 secret realm Night Dweller alone, with 12 hours to prepare. Suddenly, a bright blue light appeared in the center of a large hall, pulsing with energy. Then the light expanded, forming a vibrant, spinning blue portal. And so, Xiao Qiu emerged from the portal, surrounded by that radiant energy. He quickly realized that, thanks to the system portal, he could enter the secret realm without applications or scans. He then wondered if the style of this secret realm would be medieval European this time. Thus, he began walking down a long corridor, its tiled floors and walls resembling an old cathedral. Up ahead, the young man stopped in front of 2 imposing statues that looked like winged gargoyles. As he approached, he wondered if they were really gargoyles marking the entrance to the place. However, the statues began to crack and move, coming to life in a terrifying way. One of them was a level 3 scarlet gargoyle, with the appearance of a sculpture but the instincts of a predator and reinforced defense from its stone shell. Xiao Ku realized that gargoyles were demons with hard skin and natural resistance to magic, making them difficult opponents for both physical and magical attacks. He thought that if Yan Six's group encountered these monsters, they would probably suffer heavy losses. The next moment, the two gargoyles attacked Xiao Qiu ferociously. One lunged with its jaws open, ready to bite. The other also leaped forward, revealing sharp teeth. However, he had already partially transformed, with a demonic face, and pitied them for having to face him. He quickly assumed his full demon form, with wings and armor, regretting that his enemies had to confront him. Seconds later, the gargoyles lay shattered on the ground, while Xiao Qiu stood with his back turned. The floor was covered with chunks of stone, softly glowing. He let out a sigh, still in his demon form, and looked ahead through the vast corridor. Suddenly, more gargoyles, hidden in the smoke, emerged and charged forward. Additionally, others descended from the walls to attack the young man. In his demon form, he challenged them, inviting them to come at him. An even larger group of gargoyles advanced, some flying through the air. Many gargoyles surrounded Xiao Qiu, who prepared for battle. He crouched into a combat stance, ready to fight. He unleashed a powerful attack, launching energy at the monsters. There was a violent impact as he struck one of the gargoyles. Next, he pierced another monster's body with force. Another gargoyle was struck with extreme brutality. Moments later, the monster was completely shattered, its fragments scattering. The ground became covered in debris from the defeated enemies. Xiao Qiu turned, his imposing demon form standing tall after the battle. Farther ahead, the Gargoyle King, one of the monsters, was visibly shaken. Xiao Qiu then taunted the creature, asking if it was afraid. Gargoyles weren't supposed to have emotions. He grabbed the Gargoyle King by the neck, showing his overwhelming strength. With a crushing blow, Xiao Qiu smashed the Gargoyle King's head. Right after, he quickly moved to the side, dodging an attack. Xiao Qiu's demon face was filled with determination. At that moment, a new and imposing enemy revealed itself, the level 4 Rex Gargoyle leader, which looked like an elaborate creation with a human appearance. Xiao Qiu commented that it was a monster with both the body and look of a human. The Rex Gargoyle leader, holding his spear, replied that this appearance only made him want to kill him even more, and charged into battle. Meanwhile, the entrance door to the secret realm was seen, seemingly untouched. However, it was thrown outward, indicating an abrupt entry. Shortly after, a group entered the secret realm, all ready for battle. They walked through the place, which looked devastated and full of rubble. One of the group members asked the captain if the secret realm hadn't appeared less than 12 hours ago, and if they weren't the first group to enter. The captain confirmed that the testing office had assured them that was the case, and that the entrance had been sealed before them. Then, the girl warned the captain that someone very powerful had been there before they entered. The captain asked what she had found, and she told him to look at the fracture lines in the stones. The girl explained that such marks were caused by blunt weapons used against gargoyles, but she found it unlikely for them to leave such large fragments behind. She expressed her surprise, saying the gargoyle had been treated like a rag and torn apart by force. The captain was shocked, asking if it was done with bare hands and how that could even be possible. Another group member agreed, confirming there was no doubt. Then he pointed and told them to look. There was the gargoyle leader Rex, completely destroyed and hanging from the ceiling, with his weapon embedded in his body. The Secret Realm Inspection Bureau of Da City stood imposing under the clear sky. Suddenly, a stack of papers was slammed on the desk, and an angry voice questioned the lack of results after such a major failure. The director, visibly irritated, explained that at least 7 teams had reported that all the monsters in the secret realms were already dead upon their arrival. This, he said, indicated a serious case of negligence, as teams or individuals had evaded surveillance and entered the realms without record. Then one of those present asked if that wasn't actually good, since secret realms had to be cleared anyway. The director firmly replied that on a smaller scale, it was internal assistance and negligence, and on a larger scale, it was a threat to the Federation and humanity. He continued, reasoning that if the infiltrator only destroyed monsters, it wouldn't be a problem, but what would happen if he ambushed an expedition team? He reminded them that the new generation didn't know the barbaric years before the Bureau, when the leading cause of casualties in secret realms wasn't the monsters, but the blades of other humans. He stated that humans should not die due to unnecessary internal conflicts. He then returned to the main topic, holding a document about a level 4 gargoyle secret realm. According to the documents, it all began with the infiltration into the gargoyle secret realm, and the strength of the infiltrator seemed to be level 4 or 5, considering the 6 realms that followed. A woman asked why it was considered a single individual and not a group, and the director explained that the marks were all of the same type and the monsters had been destroyed in the same way. Moreover, no single individual could use all the spoils obtained from clearing so many secret realms. Thus, he ordered full surveillance in the city and on all markets to trace the spoils from the 7 realms, demanding immediate reports, and everyone complied. A bustling professional trade market in Da City seemed like a good place to start the search. A muscular man handed some money to Xiao Qiu, asking him to check it and to look for him again for future sales. Xiao Qiu accepted the payment and confirmed that he would. While counting the money, Xiao Ku thought he had sold things too cheaply again, but materials from secret realms weren't very useful to him. He glanced at a system screen, confident that he would continue to grow stronger by completing tasks like the political strategy of the Night Dweller. With that money, he hoped to cover the rent at Yan Sixi's house. However, realizing that 3,200 was a low amount, he voiced his frustration. Meanwhile, Yan Six was trying to sell a longsword, explaining that despite being old, it had slain many monsters and was always kept sharp. The vendor replied that the sword was full of scratches and the blade was thin, at risk of breaking. It was only worth scrap. Yan Sixi seemed shaken to hear that the blade her father left behind was being considered scrap. The vendor then offered 3,500 for the sword, claiming it looked pathetic. Sadly, she apologized to the Flying Raven, explaining that she didn't want to do this, but needed the money for Qianliu's medical expenses. The vendor thought she didn't know anything because he, with 30 years of experience, was sure the blade contained ember-forged iron. It was a rare material from secret realms, and by extracting it from the blade, he would earn more than 10,000. That way he rushed her, saying that if she didn't want to sell it right away, he wouldn't be interested in the 3,500 anymore. However, the protagonist asked for a moment. Yan Sixi then saw Xiao Qiu and asked if he was also there to negotiate, but he replied they would talk about that later. Xiao Qiu's eyes locked onto the sword. A screen displayed the blade's name as a level 5 professional longsword, just a sword made of some materials and stained with demon blood. He said he wanted the blade, and Yan Sixi, surprised, asked if he really wanted to buy it. The vendor interrupted, saying they had already agreed on a price and that his interference was inappropriate. Xiao Qiu handed over a large sum of money, saying it would be enough, while the vendor looked shocked. The vendor, desperate, held his head, feeling like he was going insane. Later, Xiao Qiu and Yan Sixi sat on a bench. Yan Sixi told him the blade's price would be at most 1,500 since he had already saved her life many times. Xiao Qiu insisted that living with her was already part of the payment and that the money was for housing and good food, and even though she thought the amount was too much, Yan Sixi accepted due to the benefactor's insistence. Moreover, he revealed that the blade was not as simple as she thought. It was worth well over 10,000 even if he couldn't explain why. Yan Sixi was surprised, realizing that the blade, kept since her childhood, seemed to be as full of secrets as he was. She mentioned how he had left before the team the spider's secret realm and how he obtained so much money so quickly, but assured him she wouldn't ask about his secrets or tell anyone. Asking him to be kind to the flying crow, Yan Sixi explained it was the last thing her father had left for her and her sister. He reflected on the name, finding it fitting, like a crow that moves freely, hidden in the darkness. She felt useless and disloyal for not being able to protect her father's last belongings, but if she didn't sell them, she wouldn't have money to care for Qianliu. Xiao Qiu asked about her sister and the Great Ghost incident, and Yan Sixi confirmed, saying it was a level 10 monster from a secret realm that caused massive destruction. The army and professional heroes were nearly wiped out by that demon, so professionals and veterans joined the fight, and through their sacrifice, ordinary people were able to take shelter. Sadly, her father also died in the incident, and only the flying crow was recovered. The most lethal thing about the Great Ghost was the deadly radiation it emitted, staining the sky and half the city with a miserable green hue. People near the Great Ghost turned into flesh and blood due to the radiation, and even those farther away eventually died. Hanli was hit at the edge of the zone. Hanli had been skilled with swords since she was little, even beating older kids with a wooden sword, and everyone believed she reached level 5 or higher. Because of the Great Ghost, she now needed constant treatment to contain the radiation, which is why Yan Sixi abandoned combat and chose to become a healer. She commented that the Great Ghost was defeated with a single strike after being transferred, but 10 hours had already passed, which was shocking for its impact on ordinary people. As a result, he confessed that this was why he hated monsters so much. Xiao Ku recalled government funds for victims of the Great Ghost and asked if her sister wouldn't be reimbursed, but Yan Sixi was surprised and doubted that such a thing even existed. Sighing in relief, she felt as if a weight had been lifted from her heart and suggested they head home. She joked, reminding him that her cooking was good and that he'd see her true culinary level that night. Meanwhile, two men in suits, who looked like they were from the bureau, passed by them. One of the men asked if they'd be able to find this secret realm thief. The other replied to trust the director's analysis. If the thief wanted to sell stolen goods, he'd come to a place like that, and colleagues were already investigating other trade locations, so they agreed they had to find the secret realm thief. Night fell over the house where the sister was. Qianliu, in her wheelchair, annoyed with keyboard warriors, thought about drinking water just to spit it at them. Suddenly, an urgent knock at the door startled her. It didn't seem like her sister or the stranger who lived there. Eyes wide, she recognized the people from the Keijing Investment Corporation. Huge cracks and explosions spread across a reinforced door. Qianli, terrified, looked back, her eyes wide open. She then sat in her wheelchair, watching the outside area. The girl held a wooden sword tightly. Thus, she positioned herself in the chair, pointing the blade toward the entrance. Suddenly, a man and his two companions broke down the door. He smiled and said he knew someone was there. He quickly spotted the young girl and called her little cripple. He asked if she planned to stop him with that toy sword. Furious, Qianli stood up, holding the weapon and cursing at him. She attacked, and the man remarked it was impressive as he blocked her strike. However, he ended up falling from the chair. On the ground, she cried in rage, calling him a bastard. A foot approached her face menacingly. The intruder mocked her, asking if she was still planning to strike him now that he was right there. He then ordered the men to search for the two who had hurt his crew, and they responded, yes. They began tearing the house apart, tossing furniture around. One of them reported that the targets weren't found, and the leader expressed disappointment. He then said they wouldn't leave empty-handed and would take the girl to lure the others out willingly. Outraged, she shouted that she would kill him. One of the henchmen questioned the idea of kidnapping, but the boss insisted they couldn't leave without leaving a mark. He praised the subordinate for thinking and gave him a task, which was quickly accepted. He handed him the truck keys, instructing him to wait and run over whoever showed up. He smiled, explaining it would be an accident with a garbage truck since they were law-abiding citizens. Everyone laughed, and one of them confirmed he understood. Then heavy rain began to pour over the houses. Yan Sixi and Xiao Qiu walked in the rain, and she commented that they were almost home, with the boy agreeing. Suddenly, her eyes widened in shock. She spotted Qianli lying on the ground through a window. The girl was soaked by the rain, cursing the attackers. Yan Sixi shouted her name. She ran to her and helped her up, while Xiao Qiu pushed the wheelchair, suggesting they get inside quickly. She asked him to take her in, as she needed to bring things in from the yard before they got ruined, and he agreed. The boy pushed the wheelchair inside while Yan stepped away. Inside the house, they both looked out. His eyes glowed with intense determination. Outside, Yan Sixi stood before a massive pile of garbage. She was visibly upset and drenched. The man in the truck feigned surprise at recognizing the house, regretting he had confused it with a landfill. He smiled, suggesting she stay out in the rain to wash off. He added that this was just the first gift from the company. From inside, Qianli screamed for her sister. She tried to get out of her chair, but Xiao Qiu held her back, asking her not to go. He explained that going out there would only make her feel worse. They both watched Yan alone in the rain. They continued to look at the girl in her wheelchair. She was soaked with a sorrowful look on her face. Outside, Xiao Qiu and Qianli stayed together. The girl asked why this was happening. Then she asked if there was justice in the world. He replied that it had never existed. She asked if it would exist in the future, and he said no, trying to explain further, but told her that the kind of justice she sought was built upon injustice. On the other hand, he added that even the rain falling was unequal. He held the sword with her, saying the water hit both the suffering and the unjust. The world was unfair, just like the rain. Without hesitation, he broke the wooden sword with a glowing hand and declared that it too was unjust. Heartbroken, Qianli cried while holding the pieces. Xiao Qiu then said her family's problems were small to him, that he wasn't interested in the injustice they faced, and preferred to focus on more important things. However, the problem always came to him, which he found irritating. She asked where he was going. He immediately replied that he was going to eliminate them. Alarmed, she asked if he was crazy. Keijing wasn't small, and their fighters were high level. She reminded him he'd said the problem was small and begged him not to go, saying it would be the end of him. He picked up the sword hilt, admitting it was a nuisance. He drew the blade and said he liked fighting boredom with more boredom. Moreover, he used violence to solve problems. Heavy rain fell over the city. The rain hit a tall building belonging to Keijing Investments. On the left, a man in a suit toasted to success, while the one on the right declared that development would be their task and they should profit together. Meanwhile, Xiao Qiu, wearing a blue shirt, stood in the rain. His expression was serious as he watched the storm. Shortly after, inside the building, some security guards patrolled the lobby. One of the guards with glasses showed surprise at what he saw. Suddenly, Xiao Qiu entered through the revolving door, stepping into the building. In response, the guard with glasses grumbled about yet another troublemaker, and the other guard groaned that problems always happened during his shift. Then one of the guards asked if the boy knew where he was, and another told him to put away the weapon he was carrying. However, Xiao Qiu told him to stop as an aura emanated from him. His expression remained calm and determined. Suddenly, the face of the security guard with glasses appeared covered in cuts. Next, Xiao Qiu stood over fallen guards, with blood and debris scattered across the floor. A mission screen appeared showing blood sacrifice blade, and explaining that the blade had either awakened or was stained with the blood of a demon god. Additionally, the mission required the use of the flying crow, and the elimination of all hostile beings. The reward was that the flying crow would use the blood to be enhanced. Xiao Qiu received the mission with a resolute gaze. Up ahead, more guards appeared, some wielding katanas, coming from the elevator. However, Xiao Qiu found himself surrounded by several of them. One of the guards alerted the others about the hostile intruder and called for caution. Soon, Xiao Qiu was in the center, surrounded by 4 armed guards. 2 guards then rushed in, and one of them shouted for the others to attack. But Xiao Qiu moved swiftly, dodging their strikes while launching his own attacks. His face showed complete focus as he moved with agility. Further ahead, the guards were falling one by one, as Xiao Qiu continued his relentless assault. A guard prepared to strike back, but Xiao Qiu was already upon him. His eyes glowed an intense red. The guard looked shocked and terrified. Suddenly, a blade cut through the air. At that moment, Xiao Qiu plunged his blade into one of the guards. He then attacked another figure, which was shredded into pieces. One of the remaining guards saw that Xiao Qiu's blade was stuck and shouted that it was their chance. Even so, Xiao Qiu delivered a punch, hitting the enemy hard. He used his other hand to strike again. The struck guard screamed in confusion, asking why Xiao Qiu's punch was stronger than martial artists, even though he used a weapon. Thus, Xiao Qiu stood, blade in hand, over the fallen guards' bodies. He then moved forward, leaving a trail of blood behind him. Elsewhere, a man on a couch said they should take the sister's house soon, and if they resisted despite everything, he would use other means, though he doubted they'd be that foolish. Then the blonde-haired man said that Li Rongqi would still have to act, since with the area redeveloped, they'd make huge profits. Suddenly, a man burst into the room, shouting that things were going badly. In a rush, he explained that someone was killing everyone to get into the building. The man in the dark coat said someone was slaughtering many in the lobby. The leader asked how many intruders there were, and upon learning it was only one, mocked that he must be tired of living to come alone. The leader stated that at Keijiang, they always made sure to target the right person before acting, avoiding high-level professionals or people with power and influence. With that, he called the others to go check out what was happening. A weapon, an axe, began glowing with energy. The 3 men advanced, the leader wielding the glowing axe. However, the leader looked confused by something he saw. Suddenly, a man was begging not to be killed, but an invisible force struck him. The man collapsed lifeless, and Xiao Qiu could be seen at a distance, standing at the top of the stairs. Xiao Qiu watched the scene with a cold gaze. The 2 remaining men, including the leader, stared in shock. However, the leader pulled himself together, asking what there was to fear. They were level 4 professionals, and the other agreed. The blonde man summoned ice crystals with his hands. The leader's axe gleamed with a reddish aura, and the other aimed a pistol, wrapped in green energy. The leader asked if Xiao Qiu was afraid now, and said if he surrendered, he would leave his body intact, though he didn't know what grudge Xiao Qiu had with the Keijiang Corporation. One of the men then recognized Xiao Qiu as the one who had shown up at Yan Sixi's house and put Tujing into a coma, and the leader confirmed it was him. Xiao Qiu thought that with 3 level 4 professionals, it would be troublesome if he remained in human form. A loud sound echoed, indicating an impact. Suddenly, the environment went dark, startling the 2 men. The axe wielder questioned what the invader was planning, and the other suggested he might be an assassin who lurks in the dark, stronger in the shadows. However, the blonde man declared that in the darkness, he was the king who controlled time and space. Additionally, the man with the pistol activated his night vision, saying that with that ability, the darkness was like daylight to him. Soon after, he noticed something strange and asked what it was. Then, Xiao Qiu appeared, transformed into a monstrous and imposing figure. In utter shock, he cried out in horror the word, "Monster." Meanwhile, the rain poured heavily over the building. The man with the pistol was sweating cold, his eyes glowing with night vision. He pointed his weapon towards Xiao Qiu's monstrous form in the darkness. However, Xiao Qiu moved at an astonishing speed, barely visible. The man with the pistol fired both his weapons toward the figure. Despite that, he realized his own body was bleeding. Xiao Qiu had already attacked him. The axe-wielding leader shouted for Joseph, smelling blood, and asking if he was hurt. Finally, he saw Joseph lying on the ground, a pool of blood spreading around him. At that moment, lightning slashed through the sky, illuminating the building. But the creature turned to face the leader, who stared back as flashes of lightning lit up the scene. Suddenly, a red aura of attack emerged. The leader managed to block the creature's strike with his axe, sparks flying from the impact. Terrified, the leader thought that if he had reacted a moment later, he would have died on the spot. The blonde man who conjured crystals looked on in horror at the scene. He raised his hand and launched a large crystal, shouting, "Art the ice arrow." The creature prepared to take the hit. Its monstrous hand, with sharp claws, moved forward. The ice arrow struck the creature head-on. However, the creature extended its hand and shattered the ice with ease. A reddish mist emanated from the creature, and blood seemed to drip from it. The creature looked at the man with red, threatening eyes. The leader, frightened, asked what that sound was, feeling the impact from afar. Then the leader looked up, and a massive, fur-covered paw dropped in front of him. A red mark appeared on the leader's neck. He looked at it in shock and screamed in terror. The creature stood atop the lifeless body of the leader, blood dripping from its form. Its blade was stained with blood. Elsewhere in the building, 3 more men in suits, wielding katanas, watched the scene. One of them, with a pale face, muttered something in shock. The creature drew closer to them, its red eyes glowing brightly. A dark blur, the creature's form, moved swiftly through the room. The creature lunged at the men, its eyes glowing with intensity. In the darkness, the sounds of blows and splattering blood filled the space. The creature stood tall. The 3 men lay defeated on the ground. Then the bearded man shouted, exasperated, that enough was enough. He stood at the top of the stairs watching the creature. The creature sniffed the air, identifying him as a level 6 professional. With a sharp gaze, it questioned whether he was a demon, but soon concluded that there was no sign of demonic madness in him. The creature reappeared, and the man considered whether it was a shifter but dismissed the idea. None of them could take on a demonic form with such intense aura. He continued, saying he had never seen anything between a human and a demon before, and that selling it would make up for everything. After all, it was a genuine demonic creature. He declared that, demon or human, encountering him here would be its doom, as the losses would infuriate his superiors, though the discovery of such a being would please those experimenting with fusions. A dark shadow launched a green energy attack toward the creature. The attack aimed straight at its head. The creature dodged the strike. The man, with a satisfied grin, acknowledged that the humanoid demon had fast reflexes. It had evaded the attack. However, he said he had already gauged the creature's limits. He rapidly unleashed multiple green energy attacks. The strikes landed on the creature. The man then called the creature a cockroach-like demon, and right after, he assured that this attack wouldn't be so simple. The creature took the hit to the chest. Then several green projectiles were fired toward the creature. Smiling in triumph, he thought the creature had fallen into his trap. He extended his hand. A pistol appeared in it, ready to fire. He then aimed the gun directly at the creature's head. A dry click was heard. He pulled the trigger, hitting the creature in the head. The man smiled, certain he hadn't missed, not in all his years of battle, and at this distance, the creature's face should have been blown apart. He only regretted not capturing it alive. Still, the body would be valuable. However, the creature remained standing, its red eyes glowing intensely, and its face appeared untouched. The man was stunned, murmuring that it was impossible. The swordsman, surprised, realized that the creature shouldn't have been able to dodge an attack from that close. The red-eyed entity then thought the only explanation was that it had deduced he would fake a move. The warrior then asked how it knew, and the shadowy figure replied that it was the style of Rapiera 19. She remarked on the great effort the fighter must have made to use such a style. She explained that this technique was created to be easy to learn and deadly. However, the creature added that she created the style to be used only by righteous people. She asked if he knew that, while the swordsman scoffed, saying the technique belonged to Mask. Furthermore, he added that annihilating beings like her was an act of justice. On the other hand, the creature asked if she was truly a monster and questioned whether what he had done to the families was just. The man then said he didn't care which resident of the Keijian company she was, nor if she was seeking revenge. Additionally, he declared that the only thing a monster should know was that human society always moves forward, and anyone who stops it commits a sin. As such, the hunter vowed that he would always be on the side of justice, something that Abomination would never understand. Suddenly, the attacker launched a greenish energy blast at his opponent. The creature observed the strike, understanding its intent. She then commented that she finally understood the man's concept of justice. A red energy began to form around the entity. While the swordsman looked shocked and frightened by the situation, he expressed total confusion. Immediately, the crimson energy pierced the warrior's shoulder, causing heavy bleeding. More of the scarlet energy materialized, forming a sharp point. It moved swiftly, piercing the swordsman's face. Meanwhile, the intense rain continued to fall over the city. Next, the man, now restrained by the energy, muttered that it was a surprise attack. Cursing, he demanded to know what kind of monster that creature was. On the other hand, the entity began to question whether she hadn't been clear, adding that she had already revealed her identity. The creature, now more imposing, prepared for another attack. A red blade formed from the energy, appearing more solid, emitting a strong aura, and the warrior began to wield it, surrounded by the burning energy. A part of the sword was shown in detail, with an ornate hilt. An information screen revealed that the weapon was the Blood Raven, a weapon with unlimited growth, stained with demon blood. Another screen detailed Blood Raven's special ability, a powerful blood blade capable of tearing through the ground. Immediately, the warrior asked if the sword's name was Blood Raven, feeling a heartbeat coming from it, even without major visual changes. Thus, the creature observed that a demon blade that grew infinitely, perfectly matched a constantly evolving monster like herself. Meanwhile, another man watched in shock, murmuring about the boss. The entity remained silent, observing. On the ground, the defeated one begged not to be killed. The creature raised the Blood Raven, ready for the final blow, ordering the Blood Raven to strike. The Blood Blade surged forward, hitting the enemy with force, rushing forth, destroying everything in its path. Desperate, the man screamed in plea. He was consumed by the blade's red energy. The Blood Blade rose along the buildings, leaving a trail of destruction, and flew upward into the rainy sky above the city. Below, military troops organized themselves, forming a shield wall, while another unit, armed with guns and bows, waited under the rain. Then, a soldier informed Commander Jiang that the Keijiang building was completely surrounded, with all streets and sewer networks guarded, ready to strike. However, Commander Jiang ordered them to wait, preferring to persuade the occupants to surrender to avoid harming innocents in a rash assault. Despite that, the leader expressed skepticism about the innocence of many inside the building, but stated that judging everyone was the federal government's responsibility, reiterating that even with countless excuses, those involved would be duly punished. Suddenly, a soldier announced that someone had exited the building. Xiao Qiu, wearing his blue shirt, appeared at the entrance. He smiled, covered in blood. Meanwhile, Yan 6 was in shock, asking if Xiao Qiu was crazy for going alone with just a sword. She quickly grabbed her golden umbrella. Her sister called out to her, asking her to wait, saying she wanted to go too. Yan 6's umbrella opened, indicating she ran out into the rain. She stopped and looked forward, surprised. When a soldier from the city defense approached, asking if she was Yan Chanchin, she confirmed her identity, asking if something had happened. The soldier explained that he needed her cooperation for an investigation. Additionally, the officer asked if she recognized the man in the photo he showed her. In shock, Yan 6 exclaimed Xiao Qiu's name. She then asked what had happened to him, wondering if he was still alive. Finally, the soldier replied that Xiao Qiu was not only alive, but also in good health. A special prison of the City Defense Army stood under a cloudy sky. Inside an interrogation room, the prisoner sat in a chair, handcuffed. Soon after, Commander Jiang was observing through the glass, asking if the man was still refusing to say who he was or where he came from. An officer then replied that yes, he had confessed to the attack on Keijiang Investment, but beyond that, only his name was known. Thus, the officer revealed that the individual's name was Xiao Qiu, but there was no record of him. It was as if he were a ghost who had slipped past all government surveillance. For that reason, the suspect had been linked to Yan 6 in an investigation. The Monitoring Bureau was also pursuing him as a mysterious thief capable of accessing the secret realm. Then the commander murmured that it was indeed mysterious and asked about Yan 6's identity. Shortly after, the subordinate informed him that the woman was a level 2 healer and her father a level 5 professional, which surprised the superior. Indeed, the officer confirmed, explaining that Yan 6's father had served in the military, but his strength had declined after an injury. The agent added that the healer's father had refused a position and died in the Great Obscenity incident, while her sister Yan Canli was left disabled. Later, Yan 6 described that she had been exploring the secret realm with her team, the Steel Cutting Squad, when the stranger appeared without warning, and this version was confirmed by other survivors. Based on the information, it was revealed that the attacker acted to kill at Keijiang, since the company wanted to acquire Yan 6 and her sister's land, which led Commander Jiang to reflect. Right afterward, the commander exclaimed, labeling the prisoner a bloodthirsty swordsman. A bearded man, Director Arthur, approached and Jiang called to him. Then Director Arthur said they needed to go question the detainee in person. The officer explained that the commander and director were the strongest in the city, so the man inside posed no threat. The interrogation room door opened abruptly. With the sound, Xiao Qiu turned his head to look. His fixed eyes revealed a thoughtful expression. Upon entering, Jiang wondered if the prisoner was looking at him. However, the commander corrected himself, stating that Xiao Qiu's gaze was fixed on his cloak, which led Arthur to question the nostalgic expression on the young man's face. At that moment, Commander Jiang held up some papers and confirmed the suspect's name. Then, seated at the table with Arthur, the commander declared that given the crimes, Xiao Qiu surely knew what awaited him. With that, he offered the options: a death sentence or the chance at redemption on the most dangerous front line, fighting monsters to purge his sins and return to the human world. Jiang warned that surviving in the expiation battalion was nearly impossible, with many dying in the first battle and others having to face up to 3,000 monsters for redemption. Faced with this, the prisoner asked if fighting monsters on the front line was a kind of punishment, adding that even with more crimes, his experience there should already have purged his sins. Noticing this, Jiang asked if he had already been on the front line against monsters, and the young man confirmed, saying yes, but in another status. Arthur and the commander exchanged looks. Then Jiang noted that few professionals had survived the monster front line, suggesting that they could identify the detainee by comparing photos. Thus, the commander revealed there was still hope, since he and Arthur, by his side, had also once been assigned to the monster front line. The director emphasized that with almost 10 years on the front, only Mask and the first pioneer heroes were more qualified than him. With pride, Jiang showed his masked medal, revealing he had fought under Lord Mask. However, he added that he was merely a follower, observing the leader from afar. Then, Arthur argued that since Xiao Qiu had been to the front line, he should understand how hard it was to maintain peace, as any instability could lead to the abyss, especially, he emphasized, in the face of the federal parliament. Tension hung in the interrogation room. Therefore, the director asked directly if the young man understood the situation. Arthur continued, warning that the suspect's ability to enter the secret realm unnoticed could cause great social instability, cost lives, and potentially ruin the current order. The man in handcuffs just listened, keeping his expression unchanged. The director and commander watched the young man. Later, Jiang stated that, although Xiao Qiu was mysterious, his refusal to cooperate with the federal government was useless, like trying to stop a carriage with a prayer. As he stood to leave, the commander expressed hope that the prisoner would behave and confess, warning that in the federal capital, he wouldn't receive the same kindness. The door closed with a creak, leaving the detainee alone. Thinking about what he had heard, the young man considered the idea of being transferred to the federal capital, revealing a desire to see that place again. However, he soon concluded that, for now, that would not be possible. Then, a main mission message appeared: the reincarnation of the Great Obscenity. A mission description revealed that the Great Obscenity had not been eradicated. It could be reborn from residual infectious radiation, and its reincarnation would occur within a few hours. Next, the mission objective was revealed: destroy the new Great Obscenity of Calamity, with the reward being the core of the Great Obscenity. Soon after, an image of the monster, classified as Calamity level, appeared, indicating that while this did not signify a high-level threat, its strength ranged between levels 7 to 13. In fact, Xiao Qiu had already foreseen the creature's return. This had happened in his previous life, when it was reborn like a weed that accumulates strength to grow. And so he had been transferred to the front lines after the trial, working non-stop to resolve the Da City crisis. Although the entity had not caused much damage, and he had destroyed it with a single strike, even so, the young man still suffered much verbal abuse. People harshly criticized him, questioning his delay as a hero, calling him ungrateful, and demanding an apology for the many deaths that occurred. In his previous life, the man now known only as Xiao Qiu, back then called Mask, had to face a wave of criticism, being judged and forced to apologize. However, in this life, he thought that there was no longer a hero, only himself. As a result, the prisoner wondered what difference it made whether those people lived or died. Later, Commander Jiang asked He Yao what he thought of the report about the front lines, saying that, being old and retired, He Yao knew more about that situation. In addition, the commander expressed that he had never seen anyone with such strength and speed on the monster front lines at that age, and his weapons seemed rather unusual. At the very least, the veteran commented that young man was not just a regular professional, rather someone with dual skills, or someone cultivating multiple class system paths simultaneously. He Yao asked if he could be a genius. Despite his youth, he had defeated a level 6 professional and mastered multiple class systems, something inaccessible to most even in an entire lifetime. However, Jiang countered, saying he was a foolish genius for risking his life for the insignificant Kejang, and that the final judgment would lie with the Federation, which lacked no talents. Indeed, the veteran agreed, emphasizing that this was the Federation where even Mask could be judged. As he put out his cigarette, He Yao pondered that, if Mask could be judged, then a little genius like the prisoner could as well. The cigarette ashes fell to the ground. The capital of the federal government, Star City, stood grand under a clear sky. After the Dark Ages, humanity rebuilt its cities, which at best resembled 20th and 21st century urban areas. However, Star City, a symbol of human resurgence, had already reached the concept of a futuristic science fiction city. In a tense meeting, outraged officials debated how a brazen criminal had killed dozens, including a level 6, challenging the government and making them question if they were living in barbaric times. He Yao looked at a photo, noting that the young man seemed talented for having such a youthful appearance and still managing to kill a level 6 professional. Another officer argued back, saying that talent wasn't everything. The more gifted, the greater the risk, and that without harsh punishment, the peace of the people would be in danger. Moreover, the officer demanded the public execution of the prisoner as both an example and reparation for the victims, lamenting the destruction of his lucrative company in Dai and the financial losses due to the interruption. Understanding the situation, He Yao declared that the detainee would be sent to the front lines of the monster retreat and assigned to the 1st Division of the Expiation Battalion. Shocked, the furious officer reacted with surprise upon learning there would be no public execution. In his mind, the man feared that his white gloves in other places were watching, and if he didn't punish those who provoked him in anger, His subordinates would no longer remain loyal. However, Yao interrupted him, saying there were more important matters to address. In an angry tone, he demanded to know why, up to that moment, they still had no news about Mask. The meeting room, silent, reflected the tension. The veteran, holding documents, stated that the former hero wouldn't disappear without leaving clues and must be nearby, yet nothing had been found so far. Finally, he asked whether Mask might suddenly reappear one day, bringing a great surprise. First, someone tried to calm the president, telling him not to get angry. Soon after, another person added that Mask no longer had any powers and therefore would not be a threat. However, the leader exclaimed, questioning how Mask, without powers, could have suddenly vanished from the courtroom. Next, a man with dark hair and light eyes argued that everyone had felt Mask's energy dissipate, and with so little power left, he couldn't have done anything. Indeed, a voice agreed, adding that the campaign to decrease support for the fugitive was working. Moreover, other participants stated that even if the former hero sought revenge, few would support him, and a single man would not be a threat. Meanwhile, the head of the Federation believed that since Mask was no longer under control, he was an unknown danger. Still, he believed that, as president of the organization, he already held the greatest power and nothing could stop him. In truth, he revealed that to expel Mask once and for all, he had to give up many benefits and much power to those present. Therefore, he concluded that the fugitive had to be found and controlled for the good of all, and so he proposed they move on to the next topic. Next, a man in glasses reported that monster suppression on the front line had declined. Additionally, the number of these creatures appearing had increased by 32% over the past month, something unprecedented since the founding of the Federation. Thus, the president grew irritated, asking if, without Mask, everyone had become useless and couldn't last even a month. The man in glasses merely muttered, staring at the alarming data. Then he himself questioned whether they had gone too far with Mask, wondering if it would have made any difference for him to remain a special hero, since he never interfered anyway. At that, the leader slammed his hand on the table. Furious, the president asked if the man was questioning the decision they had all made. Trembling with fear, the subordinate answered that he would never dare. Then, the president, standing, asked if everyone had lost confidence, questioning whether the Federation could survive without Mask. He then mentioned that each city had many troops and that, with peace, their fighting ability might have declined. For that reason, he suggested sending the best units to high-risk areas. However, another man objected, explaining that the city defense force was the final barrier against demons, and redeploying them too quickly would be reckless. With a cynical smile, the president accused him of being worried about the money he earned from the defense force, despite his words sounding noble. He then continued, saying that the man's family supplied equipment to the Federation, and cutting the city defense force would hurt his livelihood. Enraged, the opponent exclaimed that he was being slandered. At that moment, the president slammed his hand on the table again, ordering them to stop. Thus, he decreed that the defense force would fill gaps in other regions. He also argued that, with no demons for years, that force needed to be reduced. Finally, he added that the condemned man should be sent to the capital to serve as an example. That day, the city defense force building in Dai stood tall under the sun. Then, a man explained to Yan Cixi and Chanli that since they had no connection to the incident, they could go home peacefully. However, he mentioned that they would be summoned as witnesses if nothing changed. Still, Canley asked in surprise if they were to be witnesses. Indeed, the man confirmed that charges were being prepared against the criminal, and the case, drawing the attention of the entire Federation, would require their presence. In response, Canley asked why they called him vile, saying he only punished the scum of the earth. The man, visibly uncomfortable, replied that the accused had the blood of dozens on his hands, and that, regardless, killing was wrong. Outraged, Qianli shouted, asking if those killed by Xiao Qiu the Vile were innocent citizens. She continued, saying those people had persecuted countless others and destroyed their families. Therefore, the word vile should be used to describe them, not the accused. Suddenly, Commander Jiang appeared, agreeing that those people had harmed many families and deserved death. Immediately, the man exclaimed, surprised by the officer's presence. Qianli stared at the commander intently. However, Jiang explained that even if they deserved death, judgment was up to them, not personal vengeance. Qianli asked why they hadn't acted, to which he replied that there would always be darkness, just as there is sunlight. Thus, she asked if they were supposed to endure the darkness, and the commander said there would always be sacrifices. Devastated, Qianli wondered if they couldn't even resist the darkness. Meanwhile, the president showed a worried look. The commander then told Qianli that her personal rebellion was unjust. Her hand gripped the arm of the wheelchair tightly. Even so, the young woman argued, if even resisting was wrong. Then she rose from the wheelchair, exclaiming that, in that case, the very existence of such a world was a mistake. The ground kept cracking beneath her feet. Thus, she declared that if there was darkness where the sun could never reach, then there was no need for the sun to exist. She then took her first steps. Soon after, Yan Cixi appeared holding a trash bag, telling Canlia that the room was still a bit messy. Her eyes widened in shock. Then she exclaimed in surprise upon seeing her friend standing, asking if she was really seeing that. With one hand extended and a green glow emerging, Canlia simply murmured, "Sister." Her hand shone intensely, and she rushed forward. Surrounded by a greenish aura, she shouted for Yan Sixig to run. Meanwhile, in the meeting room, a man was complaining about the order to withdraw 1/3 of the defense force. Another tried to calm him, glad they hadn't been sent to the front lines, which were chaotic. A third revealed that many had already resigned, and that if they were sent to the front, people would simply leave as the danger there was enormous. Elsewhere, Commander Jiang was meeting with officers, explaining that the goal was to discuss something important. Suddenly, his eyes widened. At the top of a building, Jiang murmured that aura couldn't be, while another man asked what he was seeing. The commander with serious eyes revealed that it was the aura of the Great Obscenity. The others were shocked, saying that was impossible, since Mask had already destroyed the Great Obscenity, and they questioned whether Jiang's senses were deceiving him, since he only knew the monster from its dead body. Quickly, the commander punched the air, breaking something invisible. He immediately ordered the activation of the emergency military plan, and for the population of Da City to be evacuated. Then Jiang, wrapped in a blue aura, declared that he would take full responsibility for all consequences. The city displayed a bustling routine of traffic and people. An individual was watching news on a large screen, which reported the capture of a criminal at the Kejane building 3 days earlier after a swift siege by the city's defense forces. Shortly after, he was distracted by the flowers and noticed that spring had arrived. He wondered if the plants were blooming so early due to a warmer season. The flowers kept swaying gently. Suddenly, they began to emit a strange glow. The roses appeared large and vibrant. Then the observer expressed confusion at what he was seeing. Soon, a flying creature, resembling a giant bee, appeared. The insect approached one of the roses. The bee interacted with the flowers in an unusual way. More petals and debris floated through the air. A rose seemed to grow and extend, with the addition of leaves and a stem. Meanwhile, the streetlight turned green. Thus, pedestrians began to cross the crosswalk. A boy informed the man with glasses that the light was green and they could cross. The older man looked disturbed. His face showed even more concern. Then thorny vines and roses began to sprout from his head and eyes. The boy, in shock, said he was a monster. A hand showed a green glow, while petals floated around. Quickly, other people began to collapse and undergo similar transformations. The pink petals continued to fall through the air. A young woman held some in her hands, saying they were beautiful. Soon she also transformed, while the others fled. A massive pink mass crashed into the ground, destroying the concrete. The creature revealed itself to be a misshapen pink form with human faces. Other entities, resembling humans with rose heads, appeared along with a larger figure with a similar appearance. At that moment, a warrior wielding a sword approached and instructed everyone to stay calm. He then assured them that he was there to help. 2 civilians watching stated that he was a professional and that now they were safe. The swordsman prepared for the confrontation, raising his blade. With one strike, he hit the creature, causing an explosion of energy. He looked at the monster, declaring that any being like that, when facing him, could only wish for death. At that instant, one of the infected manifested a green aura around them. The fighter questioned why the defeated creature seemed to be regenerating, wondering if it was an infection. A new figure commented on the green glow of the anomaly, while Commander Jiang asked if that could be the Great Obscenity. A colossal, grotesque, misshapen pink creature loomed over the buildings. Several dark silhouettes shrieked across the sky at high speed. Another officer, anxious, questioned where so many demons were coming from and what the monitoring bureau was doing. A subordinate informed the commander that this did not seem to be the Great Obscenity, as the victims usually rotted quickly. John considered that, in this case, they were transforming into something still human. The soldier added that, although the effects were different, the intention to destroy and corrupt was the same. Levitating, the commander declared that human flowers was an appropriate description for the beings. He also warned that monsters could evolve beyond common understanding. He ordered each soldier to guard a street and monitor the targets from a distance, avoiding any direct contact due to the high contagion rate. In response, the troops confirmed the orders. However, a civilian suddenly appeared running, pleading for help while being overtaken by a greenish infection. At the same time, another man was shouting that the monsters were devouring people. Immediately, the commander ordered everyone to get on the ground. He reinforced that no one should remain standing. Jiang activated an aura of energy around his face. Then he unleashed a massive torrent of fire toward the infested area. A nearby individual reacted to the intensity of the heat and energy. The wave of flames spread through the street, consuming everything around it. A survivor watched the burning creatures, relieved, believing he was safe. Fragments and debris were falling as he still looked astonished. Suddenly, his face dissolved, revealing a luminous substance, and he mumbled something about it. Jiang then noticed a creature with a rose-shaped head beginning to transform, now emitting a green glow. He realized that even the ashes still contained traces of the Great Obscenity's infection. The city was entirely covered by a dense green vegetation, which engulfed buildings and streets. The vines climbed the buildings, accompanied by an intense greenish glow. Among the buildings overtaken by vegetation, more creatures with rose heads were emerging. A man in a suit observed the scene, stating that it was simply a green hell. In the center of one area, a glowing hexagonal barrier appeared, surrounded by more vines. At that moment, Commander Zhang instructed his military personnel to stop using fire to deal with the infected beings. He emphasized that not a single piece of the human flower should be allowed to spread, warning of the high infectious potential even in small debris, which could contaminate ordinary people. Next, Director Arthur approached, asking what was happening. Facing away, Zhang replied that, as could be seen, it was a disaster. He then asked the director, who had witnessed the obscenity event, whether that monster was returning. He confirmed it by the smell, though he doubted its form. The commander reflected on immortality, mentioning that few monsters possessed it, and that, even when destroyed, it was merely a facade. He explained that there is an immortal jellyfish which, upon reaching maturity, reverts to its juvenile form and can repeat this process endlessly, living forever if nothing kills it. He added that the immortality of that monster was rare and recent, which was why the other didn't know about it. However, he stated that such immortality was relative, since even demons die if their environment is eradicated. According to him, the Great Obscenity wasn't just a demon, but could resurrect itself through the radiation it left behind, now able to transform polluting monsters, not just corrode. Furious, Arthur cursed. In response, Zhang asked what he meant. The director revealed that, after Mask destroyed the Great Obscenity, he had ordered the total removal of the radiation in Da, and the authorities agreed, even issuing a military order. However, right after Mask left, they ignored his orders, didn't clean up the remnants of the obscenity, and even embezzled the funds meant for the infected, worsening the contamination. Frustrated, he expressed that if they had followed the orders from the beginning, things would be different. The commander replied that they would discuss it later and asked whether the radiation had spread, since the other's office monitored those fluctuations. Then he wanted to know where the strongest energy fluctuation was, and if it was possible to pinpoint the location of the Great Obscenity. Arthur then asked why he wanted to know, and if he planned to act alone, warning that it was dangerous, as the creature was a natural disaster-level monster, level 10. In response, Zhang stated that there were no level 10 monsters in Da, not even level 9. He said the Great Obscenity was being reborn and mutating, and that this was the ideal moment to eliminate it before it reached its peak, since its infection was already at natural disaster level. He concluded that if they didn't destroy it now, they would pay a much higher price later. Surprised by his resolve, Arthur told him to be careful and not get infected by the creature's radiation, promising to send the energy data map from the monitoring office. Meanwhile, the city skyline showed modern buildings under a clear blue sky. A breaking news alert was broadcast on a train, informing that to strengthen the frontline military power and ensure civilian safety, part of the defense forces from local cities would be mobilized to the front, as decided by the council. The report continued, with a new anchor showing documents. She then announced a special emergency bulletin. She reported that a natural disaster-level monster had appeared in Da, in the 3rd province of the southeast region, and that the local forces were still organizing. Meanwhile, the buildings in the city were completely covered by greenish vines, which enveloped them entirely. On a screen, posts about Da started appearing, with users recalling that the city had already suffered disasters before and questioning why Mask, who had defeated the Great Obscenity, wasn't taking action again. In the comments, people discussed Mask's resignation from his superhero powers, expressing doubts about his decision and hoping the authorities would summon him to face the monster. A new post showed photos of the Green City and reported an evacuation order, with defense forces awaiting the approach of humanoid flowers that acted like zombies. One user asked if the green mass was a disaster and why they were seeing human demons, while others raised doubts, asked about control, and reflected on its potential. In the next update, the situation was described as out of control, with monsters spreading and urban defense being insufficient, revealing that humans were being transformed. Shortly after, a new social media post announced that the commander of Da's defense force had personally slain the Great Obscenity, claiming full responsibility. The news also stated that he had faced level 7 monsters alone and had already been a professional at that level for 8 years, even having victories against level 8 creatures. The news anchor reported that they had contacted the Da News media and would broadcast in real time. An aerial view showed the city, with green vines spreading across the buildings. Meanwhile, Zhang was flying swiftly through the dense vines covering the city. A voice claimed that he was truly worthy of being a 7th level powerhouse, and that the monsters couldn't keep up with his movements. He continued to move rapidly, dodging the vines. Then he stopped, and a voice asked if he had found something. Observing a building covered in vegetation, he noticed a figure standing out. He approached it and asked if it was who he thought it was. The figure was a woman with dark hair and clothing made of plants, revealing herself to be a giant humanoid flower. She had a bloom over one eye and seemed to emit colorful particles. Jiang accused her of pretending to be a deity, asking if she thought a majestic appearance would make people worship her, saying he had seen many like her before. He said that at the beginning of the monster era, many were worshipped for looking like gods, but once people realized they were just monsters, blind faith vanished. Arthur then warned him not to be deceived by the creature's feminine appearance, as it was the reincarnated Great Obscenity, an enemy of humanity. The commander simply replied that he already knew. Showing surprise, he stated that he didn't expect her to become the monster she was now after just a few hours apart. The creature, in turn, asked if he regretted it. Jiang replied that he did, indeed, regret it. He began to gather bright blue energy in his hand. He declared he regretted not having annihilated her when she was still in a wheelchair. Immediately after, he fired a powerful beam of blue energy. The attack struck the humanoid flower. She staggered back as fragments of energy scattered. Inside a helicopter, someone exclaimed that he was indeed worthy of being a veteran 7th level powerhouse, as the monster didn't even have time to react to that strike. The commander remained floating, surrounded by a blue energy aura. He then expressed perplexity, wondering if the blow had been ineffective. The creature began to regenerate, sprouting new vines from her head. With a cold tone, she stated that it was useless, showing that the attack had not affected her. A helicopter flew over the vegetation-covered city, background noise rumbling. Then the creature with the flower on her face emerged from among the vines. Her head emitted a green aura, and her eyes glowed intensely. She soon opened one eye, revealing a blue hue and a faint smile. The commander observed the scene and reported that it was a case of high-speed regeneration. From inside the helicopter, the cameraman exclaimed that it was insane, asking why she wasn't dead, even though she was a monster. Meanwhile, Jiang asked what she planned to do about that, one of his eyes turning red as energy gathered in his fist. Shortly after, he launched a powerful blue energy blast at the target. The attack struck multiple points, covering the creature's face in a flash of light. However, she remained standing, unharmed, with green energy forming around her. She then asked if that supposed sunlight that dispels the darkness was really all there was. Faced with that, the commander showed an expression of fury. He advanced rapidly, leaving a trail of blue energy behind him. At that moment, he felt immense danger. The creature asked if that was all the speed he had. Suddenly, a beam of blue energy passed by her. Jiang was surprised, realizing she was faster than him. As she approached, she claimed he had too little power to dispel the darkness, calling him a joke. She moved swiftly, leaving a trail of energy behind her. Already close to him, she said that people who waited for the darkness to disperse feared dying unfairly. The scene then showed an aerial view of the city, with constant movement of blue energy trails. The operator in the helicopter expressed disbelief, asking how that was possible. The commander began to understand that she wasn't actually moving quickly. He realized she was shifting locations using the plants. Director Arthur, with his hand on a console, urged the commander to retreat quickly, saying he wouldn't be able to defeat her. He explained that without eradicating the humanoid flowers, she couldn't be killed, no matter the attacks. He stated that large-scale weapons were necessary to annihilate the entire area. Jiang reflected on the situation. He asked if she really believed he could still escape, now that he was surrounded by plants. He adjusted his coat, displaying an expression of determination. His hand rested on the insignias on his uniform. He also touched one of his medals, as if recalling something important. His face twisted into an intense expression, with a red background indicating fury. The creature praised him for knowing his efforts would be in vain, describing him exactly as he appeared in that moment. Then she asked if he, surrounded by plants and energy, looked like a trapped animal. Jiang quickly denied it. His body began to glow red, and he stated that this was it. With a final cry, he declared that this was him living until death. A massive column of red energy completely engulfed his body. His silhouette was visible within the intense crimson energy. The camera operator commented that elemental specialists were not immune and that overload could cause death, wondering if this was suicide. Arthur replied that it wasn't suicide, but a maximum release that burned one's life force to raise their level. Visibly shocked, he asked if the commander had lost his mind. With red energy surrounding him and blood marks on his face, the director shouted his name. The creature questioned the maximum release, explaining that it pushed one's strength to the overload threshold, making a level 7 equal to a level 8. She detailed that it pushed every vessel and cell to collapse, leaving professionals sick or even paralyzed. She then asked if her analysis was correct. Zhang's face showed pain and determination wrapped in red energy. He then delivered a powerful energy strike. She claimed it was useless, as she could move instantly by transferring her mind. She began to glow red, initiating the transfer. Suddenly, she was shocked to realize that his fist was faster than her thought speed. Zhang's hand, bloodied and still glowing with red energy, revealed the impact of the blow. He explained that his body was constantly infected, but lightning burned away the infection in a cycle of pain. The camera operator celebrated the damage, claiming the monster had been taken down with a single strike. However, the director corrected him, saying the great obscenity had not been killed. The monitoring screen showed that the energy fluctuation remained, and the peak was rising, signaling her growing power. Before his team, Arthur stated that this wasn't the great obscenity. A subordinate with glasses asked what he meant by that. He then asked if they knew the legend of Antaius, the invincible giant who drew strength from the earth. He revealed that the creature was Antaius, and the tens of thousands of people in the city were her power source, making her impossible to stop without eliminating them. He concluded that she was one, but also 10,000, as the city was shown completely overtaken by vegetation. In a control room, a man with glasses asked if the creature was one but also 10,000. He showed concern, his expression tense. Next, the man observed that the energy was rapidly rising, reaching the highest level of the Red Secret Realm. Director Arthur stated that the event had become a level 9 natural disaster, with its power increasing very quickly. Faced with the devastation, a voice announced that the city of Dai was lost. The monstrous being expressed surprise upon seeing that human professionals could reach such power through self-sacrifice. The military leader, engulfed in red energy, revealed he had once fantasized about being a strong man capable of traveling the world with a sword. The entity asked the commander why he hadn't used his power to dispel the darkness and save innocent people, and continued demanding to know the reason for his inaction with the same question. Throughout the entire scene, the aberrations repeated the same question. The being, now even larger, maintained its questioning. A strong wave of golden energy spread across the area, impacting everyone nearby. One of the fighters could no longer contain the energy, stating that he couldn't take it anymore. The monstrous flower seemed unfazed, remaining in place. The flower-shaped creatures moved quickly through the city. The troops noticed the enemies were retreating, wondering if they had survived after the attack. One soldier gasped, but soon declared that the fight wasn't over. He then asked what that thing was, looking at something on the ground. The being began to transform and grow even larger, emanating a green aura. In an instant, it released a colossal burst of emerald energy. Its eyes remained closed as the force radiated. Soon after, one of them opened, revealing an intense green glow. The entity rose, now fully transformed, in the middle of the city. It responded to the earlier question, asking why they were asking the reason. The commander, with scarlet energy in his hand, stated that the reason was the world itself. He then formed a blade of red energy, preparing for battle. The warrior continued, pointing to the nature of this world. He said that death was nothing new in this world, and added that life wasn't new either. The monster watched its opponent closely. Its expression showed a mix of surprise and concern. The being stared directly at the fighter. On a screen, it was announced that the commander had pierced and shattered the monster, proving the courage of humanity. Subway passengers celebrated the victory, with a young man deciding to become a professional in lighting control and a child praising the hero. The warrior's red energy pierced into the enemy. The being reflected that, since life was nothing new the fighter propelled himself through the monster's body. He emerged from the creature's form, enveloped in his energy. The creature's green form seemed to writhe. The enemy, looking at the commander, wished he would go to hell along with this world. The man remained resolute. His eyes showed strong determination. The fighter's hand began to disintegrate into petals. The city was blanketed by a rain of pink petals. The entity remarked that the effort had been like an egg against a rock. In the control room, the screen showed the creature, now unharmed. Director Arthur reported that the warrior's energy had vanished. In the subway, the citizens looked at the screen, visibly shocked. A mother tried to stop her daughter from looking, but the child asked why, saying her grandfather had turned into beautiful petals. A young woman asked if it was all over, while a man waited for help, questioning when Mask would show up. The boy revealed that Mask had resigned as a hero and had been missing for a month. The girl, desperate, asked what they would do without him. The mood in the subway was one of desolation among the passengers. On a screen, chat messages questioned whether the situation had ended, with some losing hope and others doubting how fast the government could help. The discussions criticized the government for pushing Mask away and the lack of heroes present to deal with the aftermath. A final message asked about his whereabouts. A voice announced the suspicion of a natural disaster-level monster in the city, ordering the evacuation of all personnel. Xiao Ku, locked in a cell, listened to the soldiers, asking whether it was a natural disaster or just a drill. His eyes showed a deep intensity. He Yao, slamming his hand on the table, exclaimed that they were all a bunch of trash. He criticized their cowardice, outraged that it had taken an hour and a half to gather people, since the city would be destroyed in far less time. Director Arthur called them cowards, greedy, and afraid of death, asking if they had forgotten humanity's glory and sacrifices. A man in a suit suggested they shouldn't have been so harsh with Mask. Hiya reacted with a shocked expression. He then abruptly stood up in the middle of the meeting. Another man in a suit proposed a definitive plan: to use a small nuclear weapon to destroy the monster, claiming there wouldn't be much residual radiation. Others agreed, arguing that sacrificing a few would save the majority and that they could level the area immediately with the president's approval. Hiya was surrounded by smiling figures who promised that everyone would praise the president for saving the city. The officer, visibly shaken, muttered a few incoherent words. One of the suited men informed the president that something had appeared in the city of Da. The military man asked what it was and whether it was the professionals they had sent. The answer was no, it seemed to be a humanoid form. Then came the question of whether it might be another monster. A hole appeared in the roof of the city's exclusive Defense Force prison. Inside the prison, a dark, glowing rift stretched across the floor. Additionally, cracks spread in various directions along the ground. A guard was collapsed on the floor, visibly terrified. Then, a second agent approached and asked what was going on and where the prisoner was. The guard on the ground replied that he had escaped. Elsewhere, the city was covered in green plants, with soldiers gathered in the streets. A soldier informed Commander Zhang that the target had disappeared. Another warned that the plants were advancing again. One of them said he didn't want to die, while others were running. The commander ordered them not to run, and another added that there was nowhere to go. Without hesitation, Zhang decided to fight the creatures. He struck a plant on the ground with his glowing spear. He continued battling the large vines surrounding him. Another fighter called out to the captain. The soldier assured that he would fight too. Suddenly, one of the men was hit by dark, sharp spikes. He was completely enveloped by them. The soldier collapsed to the ground. Another rushed to help the wounded comrade, calling his name. He exclaimed that they had been saved. The creature, with a flower on its face, hovered above the city, emanating a green light. The helicopter pilot told everyone to fasten their seatbelts and said he was ascending, while a passenger reported that the tower had ordered a retreat. However, the cameraman asked for one more minute. He revealed that reinforcements were arriving. A red energy beam then sliced through the green vines covering the city. In a command center, people asked if it was Federation support, lamenting that they hadn't arrived sooner. Someone in the crowd pointed out that the attacker was eliminating the creatures one by one. The image revealed Xiao Q, and someone wondered if he was a hero. The warrior advanced rapidly, fighting the vines. He realized that the current aura of the creature wasn't the same as in his past life, which had symbolized decay and destruction. He noticed that this time, the being symbolized something different. Xiao Ku reflected that the entity represented the life of a primordial forest, with plants freely growing and turning everything into its own domain. He thought it would transform all into a single form of life, without pain or sorrow, but that this was the ultimate evil. However, he declared he needed to obtain the heart of the creature to gain the power to fight the void beast. He resolved then that he had to kill her. The creature said it was painful to live in that world and invited everyone to join her wholeheartedly. She promised to bring a beautiful world, free from sorrow, pain, and injustice. She claimed she felt she was no longer just one. She explained that she was united with the flowers and that the assimilated lives, once different, were now equal, with only joy remaining. She added that soon more people would join her family of pure earth without sorrow. A bright green glow filled the area. Emerald particles of light scattered through the air. Suddenly, she reported that a large group in the south had disappeared. She asked who was responsible. Xiao Q was attacking the creature with his red energy. He said he never imagined it would be her. His blows continued destroying the vines. Even surrounded, he pressed on with the assault. The entity wondered why he wasn't being assimilated, noting that his energy wasn't human and that even as a monster, he shouldn't be immune. The fighter slashed one of the green vines attacking him. The creature demanded to be left alone. He prepared for another strike. Then he struck the opponent's arm. Lines of red energy crossed the battlefield. The hero attacked with full force, causing more destruction. The creature's arm showed injuries. Small floral forms began to emerge. They moved and grew, surrounding the area. A large flower creature glowed intensely. Xiao Q was hit by an explosion of green energy. However, he resisted the impact, maintaining his stance. He had wounds on his face but kept fighting. New energy explosions hit the area. Several of them launched in his direction. The cameraman commented on the battle's speed, saying that not even a natural disaster could face such a monster, and that the scene spiked the adrenaline. People in the command center were watching the battle on a large monitor. A man with a sword asked how a creature could fight like that, wondering if it was a human professional. Xiao Q narrowly dodged death, using speed and cleverness to save time. He stated that humans fight monsters with wisdom and skill, but that the ingenuity of this humanoid enemy surpassed even a level 9 professional. The man concluded it had to be human, though wearing strange armor, and questioned what they would do if monsters surpassed humans. The creature, wounded, watched the fighter with determination. Xiao Qiu felt his power rising rapidly. His red aura expanded, filling the space. Then he transformed, gaining pink wings. Xiao Qiu, in his imposing form with pink wings, hovered in the air. A woman stared at him wide-eyed. A man in the crowd asked why the monster hadn't just dodged the explosion, and why it suddenly flew after hiding. Other spectators considered the move brilliant and unexpected, suggesting the monster had approached on purpose to suddenly rise, and one of them commented that they wouldn't risk such a maneuver without extreme self-confidence. Xiao Qiu then prepared for the attack. He dashed forward at great speed. The creature was hit and staggered from the impact. In the helicopter, a man exclaimed that the plan had worked and reported that the monster's head had been successfully split. At that moment, the entire city was covered in humanoid flowers. But suddenly, all the flowers stopped moving. The man in the helicopter noticed that the humanoid flowers throughout the city had ceased their motion and wondered if they had won, or if the monster had eliminated a natural disaster. Suddenly, one of the flowers asked who was there. Soon, several others repeated the question in unison. The same voice echoed throughout the city, the same question resonating. The creature with the flower-shaped face and glowing green head also asked who Xiao Qiu was. Then it questioned why the blade called Blood Crow was in his hands. Xiao Qiu remained silent. The creature then stated that he too was a monster. It proposed that they didn't need to fight. It said that together, they would hold the power of the entire crowd beneath them. With that, it suggested they could change that corrupted and dark world. The creature extended its hand, revealing the item called the Core of the Great Obscenity, and explained that only those recognized by it could use it, benefiting from its immense vital power. Xiao Qiu considered the proposal interesting, admitting it was a great temptation. The creature invited him to join her, asking if he didn't want to break away from that dead and impure world. As it spoke, the creature continued its speech, describing a race through mountains and valleys, toward the rivers and meeting the sea. Finally, it declared that if there were a darkness in the world that could never be illuminated, they would destroy it, and with it, the world. It reinforced the idea they would destroy the world along with the darkness. The man in the helicopter commented that the sound of tens of thousands of humanoid flowers screaming at once made his heart skip a beat, and he asked if that catastrophe was immortal. However, he emphasized that the most concerning part was that the two monsters seemed to know each other. Xiao Qiu remained silent. He reflected that protecting humanity or cooperating with monsters didn't interest him because, before being reborn, he was already sick of it. His only purpose was to kill all monsters, even if it meant becoming one, consumed by the system, in pursuit of the strength needed to destroy every creature. Sensing the silence, the creature understood that Xiao Qiu only wanted to end that disaster. Therefore, it issued a challenge, to see whether he would be the one to destroy her, or if she would destroy the impure world. Suddenly, the creature's head exploded into a mass of green energy. This energy moved rapidly. The creature began regenerating its head from green tendrils. As soon as the reconstruction was complete, it wrapped Xiao Qiu in those tendrils. The creature continued its assault, opening its mouth in a furious scream. Xiao Qiu was completely immobilized, his wings shut. However, he broke free of the bindings, opened his wings, and burst with energy. With a swift motion, Xiao Qiu flew directly into the creature's mouth. She reacted in pain and writhed. Her eyes glowed intensely green. As the internal battle continued, a dark, thorny mass appeared on the creature's back. Xiao Qiu recalled that he had slain tens of thousands of that monster in his past life, but had never managed to destroy it because he hadn't found its true body. He concluded that if the body wasn't in the head, then it must be somewhere else. The dark mass was located in the upper part of the creature's back. With determination, Xiao Qiu readied his blade. He drove it precisely into the dark mass. Green tendrils tried to wrap around the glowing core. A burst of green light erupted from the creature's back. Xiao Qiu continued slicing through the green energy. His blade moved with precision inside the mass. He persisted, stabbing deeper and deeper. The green light intensified. The creature showed extreme pain. Xiao Qiu kept striking firmly, his blade cutting through the creature's body. Another slash tore through the green matter. The blade moved with force, ripping through the core. It glowed brightly, still surrounded by green tendrils. Finally, the creature's body began to crack. Xiao Qiu declared that this was definitely the right place. Xiao Qiu, in his monstrous form, was preparing to strike with his sword. Meanwhile, the creature floated, protected by green roots and twisted thorns that wrapped around it. Additionally, Its blue eyes radiated a firm resolve in the face of the situation. Suddenly, a blow struck its face with great force, causing a violent impact that scattered fragments through the air. His eyes blinked briefly after the attack. Soon after, the creature floated towards Xiao Qiu and commented that she didn't expect to see him break a rock with an egg once again. Even so, with his body contorted, Xiao Qiu declared he had no energy left to fight. The green roots twisted around the scene, surrounding everything. Xiao Qiu remained among them, maintaining his monstrous form. The creature slowly descended, floating above him, observing. Xiao Qiu wondered what he should do in that situation. The creature stated that he looked even more beautiful without the mask. He responded with just one word. Still, she reassured him, saying she had already been killed by him and that she now remained alive only with the energy she had left. As she spoke, she hovered over a city completely engulfed by vegetation. Elsewhere, a man in a helicopter lamented that Dahi was doomed and questioned whether they had lost the battle. Suddenly, he expressed great surprise. The city was entirely covered in vegetation, while heavy rain fell over the ruins. Soldiers and civilians watched the devastated scene before their eyes. The vines spread across every building, completely engulfing them. The dark sky loomed over the rubble overtaken by nature. Then, a trail of bright light streaked across the sky at high speed, like a falling star. The glowing object continued its descent toward the city. The man in the helicopter warned that it was a nuclear bomb. Simultaneously, a blond man, leaning over a table, confirmed that the Federation had decided to use nuclear weaponry to contain the natural disaster. He deeply regretted what had been done. The creature in turn commented that humans were heartless, treating both monsters and the entire city as disposable. Lying on the ground, Xiao Qiu said that before dying, he needed to show something important to everyone. His eyes, hidden beneath the monster mask, reflected strong determination. The creature questioned who were the bastards in the Federation who had intimidated Mask. She then released a green energy that rapidly spread. The energy intensified around her, radiating an intense glow. The creature rose, and roots and green energy burst from her body. Small figures with red eyes emerged from the roots. New flowers and more roots quickly formed over her. The creature transformed into a massive column of roots, bathed in green energy. Soon, a gigantic hand made of roots stretched toward the sky. The hand grew rapidly, becoming colossal. Thus, a massive tree, covered in green leaves and glowing energy, emerged in the heart of the city. Meanwhile, the nuclear bomb continued its descent, wrapped in an intense orange glow. People on the ground watched in horror, and one of them screamed in fear. The tree shone imposingly over the vegetation-covered city. Suddenly, an intense light exploded at the impact point between the bomb and the tree. The brightness spread in all directions, blinding everything around. Indistinct figures were engulfed by the overwhelming light. The landscape vanished, overtaken by crushing white light. Soon after, Xiao Qiu was thrown backward by the explosion. His body was violently shaken by the impact. The creature's roots contracted, trying to protect her. A gigantic mushroom-shaped explosion rose over the city. The surrounding buildings were hit directly, disintegrating. Entire structures were hurled into the air, destroyed by the force of the explosion. People were struck by the shockwave, thrown far away. Amid the chaos, a man and a woman wondered if the explosion had worked. After the devastation, a gray cloud covered the place where the great tree once stood. The tree was now engulfed in intense flames. Inside a command room, someone informed the director that the energy source had vanished. The director confirmed that the natural disaster had been successfully eliminated. Commander Jiang declared that the city of Dahi was safe. He kept his fists clenched, as if holding back tension. Meanwhile, Xiao Qiu, still transformed, remained standing among the wreckage. On his chest, the symbols of honor glowed brightly. In the command room, some people were discussing. One questioned whether the disaster had intentionally collided with the nuclear missile. Another asked if that meant the threat was over. A third believed they might have been mistaken. Suddenly, a man pointed to the screen and asked them to look. On the image, the tree appeared to be splitting apart. Green fragments detached from it, surrounded by a greenish glow. Soon, pink flower petals began to float over the city, now bathed in the sunset. The city remained covered in vegetation as the petals continued to fall. More buildings were overtaken by vines, and the pink petals spread through the air. A young woman raised her hands and exclaimed how beautiful it all was. A man warned her not to touch the petals, as she could be assimilated or suffer mutations. Even so, the young woman gently held the petals. She stated that nothing had happened, and the man realized that, somehow, she had not been affected. At the same time, Xiao Qiu and the creature were lying together on the ground, surrounded by the petals. The creature rested in Xiao Qiu's arms. Her blue eyes showed surprise at the beauty around them. She reached out to the petals dancing in the air and commented that she had never noticed how beautiful spring was. A petal landed on her hand, which began to glow softly. Finally, Xiao Qiu sat on a rock, watching the petals fall. His main mission, titled Reincarnation of the Great Obscenity, was successfully completed. As a reward, he received the Heart of the Great Obscenity. A glowing green heart-shaped object floated into his hand. The heart pulsed with intense light, radiating an energetic aura. Xiao Ku recognized the item as the Heart of the Great Obscenity and also as the Heart of Yan Canli. A voice instructed Xiao Ku to equip the core of the Great Obscenity. He held the object, which emitted a powerful green aura. Finally, the voice informed him that the item had been successfully equipped. Then, a radiant altar emerged in the middle of the devastated city, marking the end of something grand. The great calamity in Da City had been overcome, and the people watching the live broadcast were ecstatic in that moment. However, while everyone cheered for humanity, something strange began to happen. A green energy emanated, surrounding a woman who seemed to be undergoing a transformation. In the blink of an eye, the humanoid flower creatures turned back into human beings. Watching the scene, most of the audience in the live stream fell silent, shocked by what was happening. However, some people realized the terrible truth. The humanoid flowers killed by the bomb were, in fact, all humans. One user questioned whether the sacrifice caused by the explosion was truly necessary, while another doubted its actual effectiveness. Additionally, someone stated that if the missing hero had been present, the calamity in Da City would have been eradicated from the start, without the need for such passivity. Another commented that if he hadn't walked away, the bomb would have been unnecessary, and various opinions began flooding the internet. Suddenly, all live television broadcasts were interrupted, and the related discussions started being removed from the web. As a result, the content was flagged as violating the rules, and all material vanished without a trace. At the Federation's headquarters in Star City, a meeting was taking place in a large room. One of the members informed the president that, despite the control measures, it would be difficult to resolve, as many had seen the facts and already condemned the former defender. The president then rested his head in his hands, visibly deep in thought. The same man commented that the bomb had killed at least 1,000 people, but that still wasn't enough for their objectives. At that moment, another member wearing glasses, Mr. Song, stated that since the absent man's name had been mentioned, the solution to the problem became simpler. He continued, saying that everyone present had agreed to use the nuclear weapon to exterminate the natural disaster, and questioned how someone so important could not bear any responsibility for it. Mr. Walter asked Song how the incident could be linked to him, since he wasn't even there and no one knew his whereabouts. Song replied that the blame fell on the missing man precisely because of his absence, and that if he had been there, the deaths would have been avoided. He emphasized that this individual had received many resources, but left without gratitude, becoming responsible for the tragedy for not caring about the lives lost. Finally, he concluded that everything that happened in Da City was inseparably linked to the figure who once represented hope. The other members at the table remained silent. Then the lights in the meeting room went out, plunging the environment into dimness. Mr. Song assured the president that he didn't need to worry, as he would handle everything down to the smallest details. The president responded that he wasn't worried, but acknowledged that with someone as powerful as the former savior, even with less strength, they could overcome any challenge. He then asked about the preparations for Project Morning Sun. Song said that after the success of Experiment 268, the plan was advancing quickly, but warned of the risk of collapse after activation, although there was no evidence of it. He concluded that the fusion between monsters and humanity was entirely possible. Song also told the president that if the missing hero had pulled humanity from the brink of extinction, it was now their turn to lead it to heights never before reached. He went on to state that by giving people the power of the creatures, everyone would become strong, and they would become something even greater. With his arms raised toward the shining moon, he proclaimed that they would become gods. The front lines of the battle against monsters stretched for millions of kilometers across the vast land, which according to ancient records included parts of Africa, South America, and all of Antarctica. However, due to intense tectonic movements, normally taking millions of years, the land underwent collapses and collisions in just a century. Before the arrival of the masked protector, the front lines were dominated by monsters emerging from secret realms, relentlessly attacking cities and human areas, resulting in countless deaths. Additionally, this area, known as the Cradle of Calamity, was feared as the place where all plagues originated. Only after the return of the legendary warrior did humanity reclaim the land, turning it into the front line against monsters and ensuring survival and progress. The natural landscape extended, with lush trees and a soft glow in the air. 4 uniformed soldiers approached a glowing blue portal emanating energy. One of the soldiers asked who would explain the situation to Captain Jiang later. The bald soldier suggested the first one should do it, but the black-haired soldier refused, saying he wasn't good with words and didn't want to disappoint. Then the portal glowed even more intensely. The blonde-haired soldier announced that the commander was emerging from the portal. A foot stepped out of the portal, landing firmly on the ground. The bearded soldier commented that Jiang Ling, a level 7 demon from the secret realm, had cleared the area in just half an hour, showcasing her immense power. He called her a genius as she emerged, standing tall and imposing. The officer appeared determined and focused. She asked the soldiers why their expressions looked so strange. The black-haired soldier reported that a natural disaster-level monster had appeared in Da City, and she asked if the issue had been resolved. The fighter replied that the monster had been handled, but something else had happened. The same soldier, visibly shaken, said that her father, Commander Jiang, had sacrificed himself in battle and suggested she check the online comments to confirm. The warrior simply said she had noted it and instructed them to head to the next secret realm. The soldiers exchanged glances, unsure of what to think. She walked ahead with the subordinates following from a distance. One of them asked if the commander was okay, and another replied that despite her lightning powers and being called frozen still, perhaps she had lost her emotions. Suddenly, the captain suggested transferring them to the expiation field, and they quickly apologized, promising not to speculate anymore. The commander's team approached a secret realm that was growing rapidly, showing that the strength of the unit determined how many portals they would face. The bearded soldier asked if she needed everyone to follow her into the realm. He added that it had been a long time since they entered a portal with her, and at this rate, they'd end up just being a support team. Captain Jiang looked at him, preparing to ask a question. She asked if he had such a low opinion of her leadership. The soldier, startled, strongly denied it, saying that would never happen. The officer walked toward the portal, and the soldier watched her. Then she entered the portal, vanishing into the blue light. The others sighed in relief. The bald one compared the captain's aura to that of a high-level monster, and another said only someone with such strong will could face that young reality. Additionally, he added that if they were to talk about monsters, their leader herself was like one, without emotion, without pain. A dark, rocky cave stretched out by the water's edge, with small glowing particles in the air. Captain Jiang Ling entered the cave. Her hand held a staff that radiated a purple light. With the artifact in hand, she stood in the darkness. Her golden eyes gleamed, alert to any movement. Observing the dead creatures on the ground, the fighter asked if another team had entered first. A dark cavern stretched ahead, with blue waters on the floor. Captain Jiang considered that, judging by the monster's wounds, it looked like all had been struck by the same weapon. She then wondered if that person had entered the secret realm alone, just like she did. Suddenly, the commander showed a surprised expression. All around, various monsters lay lifeless on the ground. Thus, Jiang Ling prepared for action, wielding her weapon. Next, the officer revealed a serious and determined expression. Meanwhile, a strong and threatening monster wielded a large blade. Shortly after, Xiao Qiu was skillfully battling 3 monsters. Observing the scene, the captain stated that the individual, despite being low-level, had remarkable combat skills. The warrior also noticed that Xiao Qiu had serious injuries and his abilities were heavily affected, and that a normal person would have already died. Even so, she noticed that he was still able to stay in the fight, using only his abilities. Then, the leader's hand glowed with purple energy around her weapon. She drove the weapon into the ground, generating a wave of energy. Thus, Jiang attacked a monster, unleashing a force of purple energy. Next, she delivered precise blows to the monsters. Additionally, the fighter struck a monster, causing significant damage. Soon after, the captain launched a monster far away. Simultaneously, another monster was hit by her powerful energy. Finally, Captain Jiang finished off the last monster. With that, the 3 monsters were taken down, while the young man watched from a distance. Turning to him, the commander asked which team he was from, what his name was, and why he was in that secret realm alone. Then Jiang showed surprise. At that moment, Xiao Qiu revealed an expression of exhaustion. Suddenly, the young man staggered, showing weakness. The fighter collapsed on the ground, his face dirty and wounded. The captain asked if he had fainted, stating that she had hoped he would be someone to respect, not a burden. At that moment, several monster heads emerged from the water with red eyes. Next, 4 bulky monsters emerged from the water, armed and ready to attack. Thus, the officer assessed that the situation was quite problematic. Then, the captain took a battle stance, her weapon glowing purple. With purple energy radiating from her mask, she thought about the monsters. Suddenly, the image of an elderly man in a military uniform appeared in her mind. Her eyes gleamed with intense light. Consequently, the warrior, surrounded by purple energy, declared that all monsters deserved to die. Immediately, an explosion of purple energy filled the cave as she attacked. Outside, in a forest, 4 individuals waited near the cave entrance. One of the men questioned why the captain hadn't left yet, since the secret realm was simple, and another suggested that, angry over the incident with Commander Jiang, she might be venting her fury on monsters. In a world of secret realms shaken by chaotic invasions, the 2 embarked on a dangerous journey in search of profit, revealing a mysterious system and the hidden strength of the protagonist. A blue glow emerged from the portal, and one of the men said that the leader was coming out. Then Captain Zhang exited the portal, carrying Xiao Q in her arms. Right after, one of the men asked the captain who he was, and another asked if the man was a monster from the secret realm. Next, the scene showed a vast area of the monster battle military camps, where a quarter of the residents were professionals and the rest had wartime duties. Additionally, it was explained that although professionals were everywhere, there was still a lack of healing professionals for missions, leaving healing to trained human doctors. At the hospital, a doctor reported that Xiao Ku's vital signs were good and he wouldn't die, but asked how he had suffered such severe injuries. The doctor explained that all the young man's organs had been damaged to varying degrees and that few professionals would survive, but he recovered quickly due to his healing ability. Then Zhang stated that the healing ability was so strong it was almost frightening. The doctor added that Xiao Ku's body showed nuclear radiation, though at harmless levels, and that the burns on his face were also caused by it. The doctor suggested that he stay in the hospital in a special room due to the radiation and predicted a quick discharge thanks to his healing and medical care. The captain simply nodded. However, the commander instructed the soldier to bring him back, saying there was no need to leave him in the hospital. In another scene, Supreme Commander Liang Zhenji was introduced. Later, Captain Jiang greeted the senior officer as professor, and the doctor also saluted him. Meanwhile, the exterior of military camp and 3 command posts was shown. Back in the infirmary, Liang reported that a rescue team from the central government had arrived to deal with the disaster, which, despite the losses, ended well thanks to the Federation. He also invited everyone to pay tribute to the soldiers who sacrificed themselves during the natural disaster. One of the photos featured Commander John. The commander stated that he had died with honor. In response, the captain simply nodded. Liang declared that dying in battle was the best choice and declined an interview about the children of martyrs. Zhang thanked him respectfully. Additionally, the senior officer assured her that her father's decision was not wrong, and that he or she would have done the same. Then he added that her guilt was only an inner struggle. Thus, the commander stepped away. He also coughed and suggested that, when Xiao Q woke up, she could ask him about the battle. The officer added that someone capable of wielding that sword was very interesting. Meanwhile, the young man's sword was resting beside his bed. Captain Zhang then questioned the commander about the sword and whether he knew of Xiao Q's identity. Afterward, the captain coughed, looking toward the door. She then turned her gaze back to the young man. The commander concluded that all she could do was wait for him to wake up. Suddenly, Xiao Q opened his eyes, looking surprised. Xiao Q suddenly opened his eyes, showing surprise. He then displayed a serious expression. Captain Jiang appeared surprised to see him. She gripped her weapon tightly. The officer walked through the hospital room. She stated that it was the first time she had ever felt threatened by someone. The young man remained in the hospital bed. He kept a fixed, thoughtful stare. A voice informed them that the IV bag could now be removed. The woman questioned Xiao Q about his curiosity, revealing that they were at military camp N3, and he realized it was part of the N-series camps. He asked if she was the one who brought him back from the secret realm, and the captain confirmed it, saying her name was Zhang Ling, and asking his name, to which he replied, Xiao Ku. A brief silence followed between the two. Then a report stated that Mask's sudden disappearance was irresponsible, and that he should repay the Federation, which had supported his rapid growth. A man declared that, in case of another disaster, Mask should be the first to act, yet he ignored the Federation's judgment and wasted their efforts. The captain noted that they were anxious, and that blaming others so harshly revealed someone's unease. She commented that Mask was remarkable for always being blamed. When present, blamed for every problem. When absent, treated like trash and blamed for everything. The military leader told the young man that although she didn't know his identity, he could leave once he recovered, as long as he didn't pose a threat to the military camp. She added that his ability wasn't bad, but she could break his bones one by one. The boy retorted that she wouldn't be able to, and the captain asked what he thought she couldn't do. Xiao Ku replied that she couldn't break his bones one by one and that she couldn't defeat him. His response irritated the captain. She replied, "Very good," and that since he had said that, she would wait for the day she could fight him. She then stated she had no more time to waste on him and needed to clear the next secret realm. A soldier asked the officer what was up with the man and why the commander wanted to bring him back to headquarters, wondering if she recognized him. The military speculated if the young man had been alone in the secret realm, if his team had suffered an accident, and what his connection with the commander might be, until one of them revealed his name. One of those present found the name Xiao Q familiar, and another felt he had heard it on TV. Someone commented that the captain looked very angry, and another said her rage seemed about to explode. A soldier noticed he had left. One of the military men asked the boy if he was okay since he left so quickly, and asked where he was going. The young man replied that he was going to the secret realm, and the soldier asked, surprised, if he intended to challenge that place in his current state, wondering if he had a fever. Xiao Q said that his heart was connecting to the great obscenity, and that this condition might last, making his body crave life. He explained that when he killed a monster, he could absorb its life energy to heal his wounds. A soldier added that he couldn't enter a secret realm without a team. Commander Liang intervened, saying to let him go, and that it was good to have someone help deal with the many secret realms. The soldiers saluted the Supreme Commander. The superior looked at the men with a reserved smile. One of them argued that it didn't follow the rules and wasn't right, but Liang replied that rules were dead and people were alive, and that the norms should serve the people. He stated that he was the camp commander and that it was his order, not allowing objections. The subordinates assured him there was no disagreement at all. Xiao Qiu and the commander exchanged brief glances. Liang watched the young man leave. He instructed them not to waste time and that half should accompany Zhang Ling and the other half follow the boy, to which they responded, "Yes, sir." Captain Zhang walked through a stone arch. She was in an outdoor environment, ready for the mission. A soldier said they had finally caught up with her, and the officer asked why there were only 2 of them, and where the others were. One of them reported that Xiao Qiu had decided to clear a secret realm as soon as he woke up, with the Supreme Commander's approval, which led another to suspect a special relationship between them. The one repeated the young man's decision to attack a secret realm upon waking, and one of the soldiers criticized him for being arrogant and reckless, saying he was playing with his life. The captain maintained a serious and thoughtful expression. She stated that it wasn't certain, and that he might have his own intentions. One of the men asked what she meant, questioning if Xiao Qiu was really that skilled. The daughter of Commander Jiang, who died in Da City, had a natural talent for lightning, became a professional at 12, reached the 3rd rank at 13, and was the only student of the commander. One of the soldiers questioned the young man about a possible secret connection to the supreme leader, saying that only that would explain the equipment he received and the permission to attack a secret realm. Xiao Ku replied that he had no connections, and the other, surprised, repeated the question, receiving another denial. The soldier said he didn't seem like someone who could have ties to the legendary commander, and the boy asked if that commander was really a legend. The soldier described Supreme Commander Liang Zhenji as a living legend, with senses as sharp as a bat's, considered 9th rank, even though officially listed as 8th. He said it was an honor to have such a powerful person in the camp, and revealed that the commander fought alongside Mask when the front lines were established. The man stated that Liang fought beside Mask in the former monster-repelling army, and wondered if the front lines were named in his honor. Xiao Ku repeated the name of the group and asked how many years ago that had happened. In a flashback, Mask remembered leading 3,000 people to the human-monster battlefront, where humans had not set foot in a long time, and there were no habitable areas. Countless creatures, coming from all directions, attacked the monster-repelling army relentlessly. The number of people dwindled drastically, but the army, despite the pessimism, proved with their blood that humanity could endure. The survivors became professionals, raised bases that became cities, and gave rise to the current military camps at the front lines. The group stood in front of a glowing blue portal. One of the soldiers told Xiao Qiu that even without knowing who he was, they trusted the Supreme Commander and would follow him. Another said he missed the fresh blood of monsters. The young man asked if they would help him. Then he stated it wouldn't be necessary, as he'd be fine on his own. He stepped into the portal that led to another realm. He declared that, as expected, he preferred the secret realms that reeked of monsters. Right after, he commented that it was because in that place, transforming, he stated that he could lose control and kill. A monstrous creature bared its sharp fangs. Then 3 wolf-like monsters with red eyes emerged in a dark forest. However, the young warrior, transformed into his monstrous form, calmly walked toward them. Then he noted that he could only maintain that form for 3 more minutes. He also considered that his body hadn't yet fully recovered from the nuclear bomb wounds, so he could only sustain the transformation for a short time. Nevertheless, he assured that 3 minutes would be more than enough for his task. Soon after, his figure became a blur, preparing for the attack as the creatures watched him. Suddenly, the enemies charged at high speed, enveloped by a purple aura. At that moment, blood spurted from the creatures as they were struck. Afterward, the 4 monsters remained on the ground, decapitated. Then, a bright green light began to emanate from the lifeless bodies. In this way, they disintegrated, leaving only glowing outlines of their forms. Consequently, the particles of light dissipated and only traces of blood remained on the ground. Then the fighter stood in the forest, surrounded by a greenish glow. He explained that the heart of the Great Obscenity was absorbing the monster's life force. Additionally, he revealed that this energy was healing his body and extending the time he could maintain his monstrous form. Meanwhile, 2 men were observing a blue portal, and one of them asked if the individual who had entered was already dead. The other assumed he was just wandering around inside, unable to find strong monsters. Moreover, one of them commented that maybe the guy was just waiting near the portal to exit. Suddenly, the blue portal glowed intensely. Immediately afterward, he came out in his human form, looking exhausted, and both of them stared at him in surprise. Thus, one of them noticed that the young man had returned from the secret realm very quickly, without exceeding the time limit. Then, the blonde-haired man asked if he had dealt with the boss of the area, and the answer was yes. However, the formerly transformed young man thought that all the enemies there had been too weak, and that he hadn't faced anything resembling a true boss. He presented claw-shaped objects, explaining that they were spoils from the main enemy, but were meant for making arrows, not swords. One of the companions noted that he took only 17 minutes to clear the realm, which was faster than Captain Zhang's half-hour record. Because of that, the bearded man remarked that, unscientifically speaking, his power might be double that of the captain's. Consequently, the young man said they should head to the next secret realm, while the blonde one wondered what kind of creature he really was. As soon as they reached a new portal near a lake, the young man signaled for them to proceed. Later, they moved to a third portal located in a forest, and again he instructed them to advance. Continuing on, they found a fourth portal inside a cave, and the instruction was the same: move forward. In another realm, a hand pointed to a footprint on the ground. Upon arriving there, Captain Jiang and her two companions noticed that the teleportation array had failed and that everything in the secret realm had already been taken. She also observed the fresh footprints, noting they belonged to the same group, while her ally asked how many rounds had been cleared. However, the third member stated it couldn't be their group, as the power of the team that cleared the area was extraordinary. Finally, the bald man guessed that a powerful team from another military camp must have done the clearing to steal the resources. The captain considered it good that someone was helping to clean the secret realms and informed them that they should return now. However, she said she needed to go back to see who dared challenge her. Later, the narrative shifted to the management office of Military Camp in 3, where teams were reporting their expeditions. Thus, the characters entered the command room. At the reception, a clerk asked if they had managed to clear 17 secret realms in just one day. One of the young warrior's companions presented a list of the cleared realms, and the clerk confirmed that the energy signatures in those locations had vanished. Then, the clerk asked how they could prove that all those secret realms were cleared by them. Immediately, several shining items, such as crystals and bones, were laid out on the table. The bald partner of the young warrior criticized the clerk for lacking intelligence, saying the items came from realm bosses and suggested verifying their energy and quantity. The clerk then stated that he didn't distrust them, but pointed out that clearing so many realms in one day was something even Captain Jiang couldn't do. The bald companion informed him that his ally, a highly skilled individual appointed by the Supreme Commander, had cleared all those realms alone, expressing admiration. The attendant asked for help with a 6th-tier secret realm that was causing trouble and had already defeated teams from Camp N1, saying they could handle it. The young man accepted the request, and his partner commented that he knew it wouldn't be a problem for him. The bald man went on to say that his friend's power was even greater than Captain Zhang's, though he didn't mean to compare. At that moment, the clerk coughed and warned the bald man about something behind him. The man asked what was behind him, and upon turning around, saw Captain Zhang herself. Immediately, he greeted her, explaining that his earlier words were just for show and asking her not to take them seriously. The captain's bearded companion informed her that the secret realms on the list were exactly the ones they had visited that day. She asked the young man if he had done all that alone, and he confirmed. Because of that, the officer commented that it was no wonder he had so much confidence, even while lying in bed. The protagonist thought the woman held grudges for a long time. Then, Captain Jiang said she had heard about a 6th-tier secret realm that seemed difficult for many, and said she would accept that mission. She then challenged the fighter, saying that this time they would see who could kill the realm boss first. The group then left the management room. The bald partner commented that he had managed to awaken the captain's competitive spirit, and the other questioned that statement. The young man reflected that, upon seeing that secret realm, he finally understood why the system had brought him to the front lines of the battle between humans and monsters. He also remembered an important event that took place on the front lines after the incident with the Great Obscenity in his previous life. The bearded man watched the swordsman in surprise. He was thinking about that young man's appearance and his blade. Finally, he realized where he had seen the warrior before. The scene took place at the command center of Army City N3. Then the commander asked if the man named Xiao Ku, rescued from a secret realm, was the same one who had massacred a company in Da City days earlier. After that, the uniformed man replied yes, confirming the information. The commander suspected it was a coincidence, but the soldier claimed to have recognized the suspect by his body, hair, and sword, even with a disfigured face. He assured that the sword was authentic and concluded that, with the chaos in Da City, The culprit had fled and was indeed the same person. Even without knowing how the individual got so far, the soldier said that in light of the coincidences, the truth seemed to be that, no matter how unbelievable, the commander agreed with the logic of the inference and said the man planned to clear a secret realm at the river fork, promising to head there after the investigation, and the subordinate nodded. He reflected that, if Xiao Qiu was truly a bandit, he had accomplished quite a feat. A lush landscape displayed a glowing portal on the ground. One man asked to follow the captain, another said they couldn't always rely on her, and a third questioned whether she feared losing her position to them. Captain Jiang stated that the men had heard about the secret realm defeating 2 teams and couldn't relax knowing she was going alone, calling it a flimsy excuse. The officer walked ahead, leading the way. Then she told the others to follow her. Before proceeding, Captain Jiang warned the swordsman that this was between her and him, and that he was not allowed to interfere. Xiao Qiu watched her in silence. The blue sky stretched above. Back in the landscape, the uniformed man stood before the portal. He questioned why the Supreme Commander hadn't arrived, since he said he would. Thus, he decided he'd have to enter first. The portal began to close behind him. Captain Jiang's group and the young swordsman entered a dark tunnel. Then his hands began to glow. Xiao Qiu reported that the temperature, humidity, and air were normal, with no poisonous substances. One of the soldiers said that finding a strong monster in such a tight space wouldn't be good, and another added that if the monsters came in groups, there would be nowhere to run. The darkness in the tunnel thickened ahead. The group stared straight forward. At the far end of the tunnel, several red eyes gleamed in the dark. The young man expressed surprise at the number of monsters, questioning if this was the difficulty of a 6th-rank secret realm. He also asked why alligators were showing up in that type of secret realm. He stepped forward. Captain Jiang readied for attack. The creatures reacted to the assault. She unleashed her power. The commander instructed them to move past the monsters. Xiao Qiu watched the officer unleash a lightning attack. The lightning spread intensely through the tunnel. The light from the electric surge scattered the darkness. She stood amidst the trail of the attack. Traces of purple energy floated in the air. A soldier commented that one strike had made so many monsters vanish. The captain explained it was just a matter of environment, since the monsters had been bunched together in a straight line. One of them told the swordsman that the leader didn't seem to be holding back this time, making it hard to surpass her. Xiao Qiu pondered that he wasn't sure what they were even competing for, whether it was the number of monsters killed or the boss's life, and found it all meaningless. The group continued moving through the tunnel. A soldier noted they had already walked for over 10 minutes without a second wave of monsters, and another added that it seemed like all of them had been wiped out by the captain's attack. She suddenly stopped. The rest of the group halted behind her. She found it strange that they hadn't come across the bodies or belongings of the 2 teams lost in the secret realm up to that point. One soldier suggested they died in the first wave of alligators, another said their gear had been destroyed by the captain, and a third praised her professional skill. The officer responded with a brief confirmation. Then she asked if anyone had heard anything. One of the men asked if it was another wave of monsters, and another said he hadn't heard a thing. The group turned to look behind them. Something began to appear. A dark shape emerged from the distance. The head of a giant monster appeared in the passage. The creature's enormous body kept dragging itself out. One of them exclaimed that the giant monster was blocking the way and asked how they could fight it, while another said they were doomed and wouldn't have come in if they'd known about it beforehand. Captain Jiang wondered why they were so scared. She stared directly at the monster. She noticed that the creature carried an aura of fear. She scoffed at its cheap tactics. She declared that such tricks were useless against her. Xiao Qiu looked at his sword. He drew the blade with a swift motion. He prepared for combat. A gigantic creature released a powerful blast of purple energy from its mouth. Then, the captain appeared, striking the creature with an energy explosion that caused a large wound on its head. With her mask covering her face, she observed the scene carefully. Right after, she saw the monster's defeated body and some men kneeling ahead. Then Xiao Qiu delivered a powerful blow to the ground. The blade of his weapon sank deep into the earth. The underground monster emerged soon after, collapsing the ground and revealing its massive body as it was attacked by him. The creature's eye was reddened and bleeding, indicating the injury. The young warrior stood before the fallen monster, surrounded by a cloud of dust. He thought it was a waste. If he had come alone, he would have entered his monster state and absorbed all the enemies. One of the men asked how it was possible for there to be another underground monster, and stated that the frontal assault from the first monster was just a distraction for the underground ambush. Next, a colleague told him that it was a close call, and if he hadn't killed the subterranean creature, they probably would have been devoured. Later, one of the men asked the captain how she had discovered the hidden presence, wondering if it was due to the trembling ground. She replied that she had been focusing all her attention on the enemy in front of her, and added that if it hadn't been for Xiao Qiu, her subordinates would have met a much worse fate. The young man confirmed that he had indeed felt the second monster coming because of the vibrations in the ground, and explained that in this secret realm, it was natural for creatures to sneak beneath the earth. One of the men claimed it was impossible, saying he could barely hear anything, and asked how anyone could distinguish the monster amid the tremors and precisely locate its weak spot. Xiao Ku remained silent, wondering how to explain it. He thought that the frequency generated by underground vibration was far easier to distinguish than that of a demon god capable of tearing space. The officer then said that the two boss monsters had finally been eliminated, praised the young man for defeating them with a single strike, and added that a regular team would have been annihilated. However, she corrected herself, saying they were not the bosses at all. She explained that if they were, the secret realm's treasure chest should have already appeared. Additionally, she stated that the teleportation array had not opened either. One of the men then asked what kind of existence the true boss of the secret realm could be. The captain looked ahead at the path. She instructed the team to stay close and not fall behind, as it was dangerous to move alone in that place. The men understood and told her they had troubled her once again. The woman replied that since they were on the same team, there was no problem in helping each other. They called her names, seeming pleased. A large metal door stood ahead. She stated that by common sense, the boss should be beyond that door, while one of the men expressed a feeling that only bad things would happen if they opened it. The captain informed them that she and Xiao Qiu would enter, and the rest of the team would remain outside, with the subordinates agreeing that they'd only be a burden. The men asked her not to get into trouble in there, as they would be waiting for their return. The captain placed her hands on the door's lever. She began turning it. They both turned the levers on each side of the entrance. Then, the door began to open, releasing a thick cloud of smoke. Two silhouettes stood out in the middle of the mist. The smoke filled the space. The door was now completely open. Then, the two entered the dark interior. A monster's footsteps echoed. The captain noticed that the sound of the steps was light, indicating they weren't facing a large monster. A humanoid creature emerged. She observed it and stated that in the monster classification, the more human-like they were, the more dangerous. The enemy walked toward the pair. It let out a powerful roar. The captain felt the creature's immense accumulated strength and prepared for battle. She hurled her spear with force. She said the enemy was underestimating her too much. The weapon advanced at high speed. Xiao Qiu observed and said that her spear's speed had likely surpassed the speed of sound, and added that if the creature bit the weapon, it would be pierced instantly. However, the monster caught the spear with its hand. She was surprised. The enemy retaliated, throwing her back with great force. The captain fell, surrounded by debris. She quickly grabbed a weapon. She fired at the monster, hitting it in the head. A purple flash exploded where it was hit. The intense light engulfed the enemy. It was struck, leaving a hole in its head. The creature appeared to be transforming. The captain looked at the creature's body as her ally approached. He asked if that was a very risky attack in her usual fighting style, to which she replied that one couldn't achieve great results without risking their life. The young man agreed, saying it made sense, and she was surprised, having expected to be scolded. The captain was observing the body. The monster's head dissolved, revealing the body of a man. She recognized the individual, calling him Christian. Xiao Qiu asked if she knew him, and the warrior explained that he was a level 6 professional from Camp N1 with his own team, the first to disappear, wondering how he had transformed. She reflected on what was wrong with that secret realm. Then more humanoid monsters appeared at the end of the passage. Xiao Qiu said he would take the ones on the left, and she asked to keep the ones on the right. The creatures advanced quickly. Captain Zhang and her companion rushed into battle. The captain launched herself into the air, wielding her weapon, which unleashed purple electric discharges. Then the lightning struck crocodile-like monsters, bursting into light. Right after, a purple beam was fired from the weapon. She remained at the center, surrounded by fallen, electrified bodies. At that moment, a creature leaped at the officer, who readied for the attack. Shortly after, the enemy's claw collided with her weapon, generating sparks. Quickly, the warrior spun around, unleashing a new wave of energy around her. Then she pierced the monster, enveloped in intense violet energy. Thus, the reptile fell to the ground, split in half and drenched in blood. She noticed that when the enemies transformed, they became faster and stronger. However, she thought that without intelligence, they were still harmless. Suddenly, she turned her gaze, as if something caught her attention. At the same time, Xiao Qiu decapitated an enemy with his blade among other already fallen bodies. Soon after, he engaged another monster in a fierce battle. With a swift move, he drove the weapon into the creature's chest. His eyes revealed focus and determination. Sparks appeared around the young man, who continued his assault. The area became filled with defeated enemies, and the heroes emerged victorious. After the battle, the captain reported that the monsters were former attackers of the secret realm. She then expressed her confusion at the situation. Xiao Qiu became thoughtful. Ahead, two monstrous crocodiles stopped before ancient pillars. They soon opened their mouths, revealing eyes glowing red. The red eyes and sharp teeth became visible. Then they knelt, turning toward the altar. The warrior then wondered what they were trying to summon there. In response, the pillars emitted an intense red aura with glowing symbols. The light grew, forming the image of two scarlet eyes. The captain reacted with surprise, fixing her gaze on the ethereal eyes. She reported that just the presence of that thing was making it hard to breathe. She declared that they couldn't allow such worship, as horror might emerge. One of the kneeling monsters was struck by the warrior's purple energy. Even so, the pillars continued to emit aura, with the eyes floating above. The image focused on the red irises. The eyes narrowed, as if watching intently. Suddenly, the monster exploded in red and purple energy. The leader asked what they were trying to summon and if the eyes were truly watching. The young man answered that it was the void demon god. He added that the only thing those eyes were watching was him. He commented that perhaps they were old acquaintances. In a vast green field, two blue portals glowed in the distance. Soon, they expanded, revealing the captain, the young warrior, and soldiers. They emerged from the portals, joining the waiting combatant. A soldier said that with that woman, no realm was out of reach. Another recalled her and the allies' victory, and a third asked what the boss was like. She reported that she needed to return to the camp urgently to inform the commander. The soldiers remained silent. Suddenly, Leader Liang appeared with his cane, saying there was no need to look for him, as he was already there. The group reacted with surprise. One fighter called him the Supreme Commander. Liang approached, accompanied by a law enforcement team. The young man asked about the presence of that team. The superior said there was nothing to worry about, as it didn't involve the others. However, he stated that the case was connected to the young man, who tried to respond. The leader then suggested he might as well call him the one responsible for the Dai massacre. Everyone around was shocked. A soldier questioned if it was a joke to put the culprit of that massacre on the front lines. Another recognized him from TV, and a third said he didn't look like that person. Shortly after, another stated there was no mistake, as he had investigated and compared, even if he didn't know how the accused got there. The captain then looked at the warrior. He smiled discreetly, confirming the accusation. Furthermore, he declared his own name with conviction. The accuser insisted that everyone look closely at his face and confirm. Then the young man asked if he was going to be arrested and taken to Star City. Liang explained that, according to federal law, fugitives must be arrested wherever they are found. He added that the only destination for criminals was the field. He paused. Then he said that arresting him was what the law required, but questioned what that meant for Camp N3. One of the soldiers looked confused. The commander stated that, in his place, he would have made the same choice. He commented that maybe he would have gone even further. He declared that the world would only improve if everyone were like the young fighter. He decided that the events of that day would end right there. Finally, he warned that if anyone mentioned it upon returning, they would be invited to leave the camp. A group was gathered in a wide green field under the clear sky. Then Captain Jiang asked permission to speak to Leader Liang. Meanwhile, a bald soldier asked Xiao Qiu what he and the captain had found in the secret realm to be so anxious. Still, the soldier admitted he was curious, but hesitated to approach the young man. Next, the warrior explained what had happened and questioned the commander about the altar and the monster's worship. Soon after, Liang replied that it was a monster god. In response, Jiang asked if those creatures really had gods. The superior stated that, although countless teams cleared secret realms every day, humanity had never advanced on the front lines. Consequently, he revealed that it was due to the origin. He explained that humans had always dealt with the symptoms, but never eliminated the source of the monsters, which made the war endless. So Jiang wanted to know where this source was and why it hadn't yet been destroyed. Liang informed her that the origin of the secret realms was the monster god itself, or the owner of the altar she had seen. He went on to say that these powerful entities could create entire realms with just a fraction of their aura, and that the front lines were close to where they resided. The captain reflected on the extent of that power, questioning whether the entire cleansing of the realms was nothing more than a response to fragments of energy. However, the commander assured her that humans were not just sacrifices, as they had already defeated several monster gods. Still, he emphasized that only one person had achieved such a feat. Suddenly, Jiang mentioned the name Mask. Liang suspected that the altar was a sign of a possible monster uprising. The officer warned that altars usually indicated the awakening of a monster god. The commander warned that if the sea of monsters emerged, the secret realms would explode, releasing thousands of creatures and wiping out frontline military camps. Jiang noted that even with Mask, many soldiers had been sacrificed, and now that he was gone, the cost would be even greater. Next, the leader instructed her not to clear any more secret realms, and said he would write notes to be delivered personally to the other camps. He also suggested she see the trip as a break, warning that living like a machine could lead to her downfall. The captain tried to refuse, beginning to protest. However, Liang interrupted her, ordering her to take Xiao Qiu with her this time. She accepted. Then he explained that since the young man had been identified, he should hide his features to move freely. Thus, the commander asked for a mask to be prepared for him. The scene shifted to a desert landscape. Then, an armored train began to move quickly, raising dust. The massive vehicle sped across the desert. Inside, Zhang remained seated, while other soldiers played cards. Xiao Ku, now masked, watched the others. One of the players asked how he felt on his first trip in an armored train, a frontline specialty. He said not to judge by appearance or speed, as it was the most reliable means of transport, able to cross any terrain. Another soldier commented that he had already said that many times. The first replied that he kept repeating it out of boredom and a need to talk. Next, a soldier informed them that they would soon arrive at Camp M2, but questioned why the report couldn't be sent by radio. The card player suggested the documents were too confidential to transmit over the network, though the other doubted monsters could intercept communications. Suddenly, a strong impact shook the train. The occupants were alarmed and looked out the window. One of the soldiers spotted a silhouette at 224 degrees. Another took position with his weapon. A third suggested they were close to Camp M2 and that the cleansing had been so slow that monsters had escaped. An explanation followed. If a secret realm isn't cleared in time, creatures escape, as happened 100 years ago, causing the collapse of the human world and the fall of nations. A fast military vehicle was cutting through the desert. Inside it, an archer was preparing. An arrow struck one of the lupine monsters that were chasing them. Even so, two others continued their charge. The soldier complained about the officers and the number of fourth-level enemies loose, stating he had already eliminated 30. Then he realized his arrows were gone. He looked at his now useless bow. At that moment, one of the monsters leaped toward him. Suddenly, a glowing bullet cut through the air. The projectile hit the creature, which exploded in light. The warrior realized they had received reinforcements. He identified the source of the shot as an armored train. The vehicle kept firing, emitting sparks and bursts of flame. The shots struck the ground around the jeep. The impact caused the vehicle to violently flip. The soldier wondered why they were doing that. A monstrous creature with a protruding tongue appeared. Soon after, a giant winged being emerged in the sky. The flying beast attacked the overturned vehicle. Then it was hit by a shot and began to bleed. The jeep remained flipped over as the monster dropped dead nearby. The soldiers began crawling out of the wreckage. One of them exclaimed that they were being saved. A large armored vehicle advanced over sandy terrain, kicking up a cloud of dust. The machine pushed forward, scattering dust and debris in its path. Shortly after, a group of people was seen running across the desert, including Captain Zhang and Xiao Qiu. A soldier inside the vehicle warned that they shouldn't approach, as there were too many enemies and they wouldn't be able to fight them off. Then, the soldier looked on in surprise at the unfolding scene. He saw that several wolf-like monsters were being attacked and said it wasn't possible. Meanwhile, the fighters from the group battled the creatures with great power, and the soldier admitted they were truly strong. The commander, with her spear and purple energy, fought fiercely against the enemies. Likewise, the young warrior attacked, unleashing blue energy slashes that disintegrated the monsters. Once again, the observer corrected himself, saying it wasn't the whole group, but the man and the woman leading them who were incredibly powerful. At another moment, one of the creatures was struck directly by a wave of purple energy. Then Zhang ordered that the wounded be taken to the train and told them to be cautious when clearing the battlefield and collecting materials. Consequently, the team promptly obeyed their leader, confirming the received order. At that point, one of the fighters approached, thanked them for the help, and asked if they were from military camp N3. One of the members of the captain's group looked surprised and wanted to know how they figured out where they were from. The soldier explained that even though he was from camp M3, they knew the warrior's nicknames, mentioning her mask, spear, and lightning control, but above all, her power. However, he also mentioned that the other fighter seemed just as skilled as her, and that he hadn't heard of anyone else of that level at military camp N3. At that moment, one of the leader's team members began to explain about Xiao Ku. He said it was him, recently assigned to their camp, and asked if that wasn't great, confirming his identity. The other fighter from N3 responded that he didn't know him yet, but believed he would soon be as famous as the captain. The commander asked why the team had been chased by so many monsters, and commented that, without luck, they could have been trapped. The soldier explained that they were just following orders. He blamed the breach of seals in the secret realms on a failure in surveillance and said that other teams had also left the city, hoping not to face the same problems. The woman with the spear asked about the broken secret realms, and the soldier confirmed that many seals had failed due to the increase in the formation of these realms, something beyond what was expected. Zhang suspected that this could be the prelude to a sea of monsters, and commented that even at just the 5th camp, the situation was already worsening. Finally, the captain stated that they should head to military camp M2 as quickly as possible. Meanwhile, an aerial view showed M2, a fortress in the middle of the desert. On top of one of the base buildings, 2 sentinels watched the horizon. One of them, using binoculars, noted that many teams had left recently but few had returned and questioned where they could all have gone. A soldier commented that they probably wanted more time to clear secret realms, which he found normal given how many were appearing. He said he planned to attack them in 2 days, and the other agreed. However, the soldier with the binoculars looked surprised. His companion told him not to worry about it. The sentinel with the binoculars then reported that it was an armored train from another military camp and urged them to quickly prepare the records and open the gates. A flag bearer began signaling to the train, asking it to slow down and stop for inspection. Suddenly, the unthinkable happened, leaving the lookout in shock. The armored train came to an abrupt stop, embedding itself in the ground and sending stones and debris flying. The collision raised even more dust and debris covering the area. The vehicle's structure showed visible damage from the impact. Thus, the soldiers from Camp M2 cautiously approached the wrecked train. On the floor of the machine, a hatch opened. From the opening, something large emerged quickly. Shocked, the fighters watched what came out, and one of them exclaimed, asking what that thing was. A body lay on the ground, holding a bloodied blade, and another soldier identified the figure as a professional. Then, a massive clawed leg stepped onto the ground, revealing the creature. It was a giant monster with an insect-like appearance and wings, and the terrified soldiers realized it was a monster. Inside the train, several shadows began to appear. Slowly, more dark, insect-like figures emerged from the vehicle. Soon after, many fully formed insect monsters started pouring out of the train. The fighters were attacked by the creatures, and one of them screamed that they were under attack, lamenting not having brought weapons. A soldier fired his rifle at the insects, trying to defend himself. However, the monsters kept advancing in large numbers. The city in the distance was ablaze, and numerous insects flew over the buildings. A wide view of the region showed it in complete destruction, with the sky darkened by the creatures. The large monster stood atop a burning building, watching the devastation. A close-up of the giant's eye revealed a disturbing view within. The creature emitted a sound similar to a chirp. Then, Captain Zhang's armored train was seen in the distance, approaching the camp. One of the soldiers in the vehicle asked the commander if she suspected that their military camp was being attacked by monsters from all sides. Zhang replied that it was impossible for the enemies to attack the base, because even fools wouldn't dare face a human group led by a 7th-rank commander. However, she admitted she wished it were as the soldier had said. Nonetheless, she warned that if it were a sea of monsters, it wouldn't be surprising if even a 9th-rank professional died, let alone a 7th. Her reddish eyes reflected intense concern. The view from the train window revealed military camp M2 in flames. In shock, the soldier with the captain exclaimed that it was military camp M2. A communication device transmitted an urgent message from the base, stating they were under monster attack and needed immediate help. The message continued, repeating the urgent request for assistance. Finally, the transmission ended with the terrible news that the commander had been killed in battle, and that military camp M2 had fallen, leaving the soldiers stunned. Explosions and fire lit up the horizon, sending up dense, dark smoke. In addition, new detonations continued shaking the landscape. Inside a facility, one of the soldiers reported that Army Camp M2 had fallen. Then the commanding officer stated that there was a sea of monsters. She instructed the team not to change course and to keep advancing toward Camp M2. A soldier questioned why they were going there, since the place had been taken and it was unclear what they would find. But the leader responded that the objective was to rescue the survivors and understand the reason for the fall. Soon after, one of those present punched the wall in frustration. He said that the leaders of Star City deserved to perish, because when Mass was around, the front lines in the fight against the monsters were much safer. Another comrade agreed, mentioning that it seemed like the creatures knew their former ally was no longer there. A thoughtful silence filled the room, with everyone remaining united. One of the men asked if anyone had noticed something strange, trying to lighten the mood. The bald one then observed that Xiao Qiu was wearing a mask, and that his silhouette closely resembled that of the famous warrior. Additionally, someone else commented that his profile was also similar, and another suggested that maybe he was in disguise. Faced with that, the bald man directly asked if he was really masked. In response, Xiao Qiu stated plainly that yes, he was. The group fell silent for a moment. Then the bald man expressed his honor and asked for an autograph later, saying his 3 younger brothers were fans. Shortly after, the commander said they would see if he lived up to the name. She then looked out the window. The scene was one of pure destruction, fire and thick smoke everywhere. Flying insects filled the night sky. Faced with that, the captain questioned whether that colony was the cause of the camp's fall. In the distance, a group of people was running, and cries for help could be heard. Closer, the fleeing civilians advanced desperately, chased by the creatures. Countless insects hovered in the air as a few soldiers approached in the background. Suddenly, the woman in uniform began shooting. Her projectiles hit the targets, which fell to the ground. Right after, she drew her baton. Stepping firmly, she kicked up dust. Spinning the weapon, she released a wave of purple energy. The force spread, eliminating even more enemies. A large sphere of energy formed, eradicating what remained around them. Pieces of the creatures fell from the sky. Consequently, the number of monsters dropped drastically, and many lay scattered on the ground. Soon the sky was nearly clear, with only a few flyers remaining. Survivors and soldiers finally reunited. One of the civilians thanked them for the help, saying that without them, they would have died, and the captain asked about the situation at Camp M2. The man reported that the place had been completely overrun and asked if they still intended to go there. He begged them to turn back, as there was no one left alive. He said it had become a monster nest, and that the commander had died in battle. Additionally, he described the creature that killed the leader as a humanoid insect, similar to the others but larger and absurdly powerful, since the commander barely had time to react. The survivor insisted that moving forward would be The captain remained silent, thoughtful. One of the soldiers looked at her baton, visibly surprised. Another wanted to know what she planned to do, while someone else asked if something was wrong. She then revealed that the group was made up of inmates from the expiation camp. The news left the others stunned. One of the men said that didn't matter, that the most important thing was surviving together. Another disagreed, thinking it might be a mistake. But the captain stated that those individuals had killed the professionals responsible for escorting civilians. She added that they were armed but didn't know how to properly handle the equipment. She noted that one of the men was holding a knife in an unusual way. She then asked if the injury on his ear was caused by a bullet, assuming it had happened during an attempt to defend the victim. The injured man and his accomplice stood their ground. Both ran toward the captain. Quickly, she spun her baton. With decisive movements, she beheaded both of them in a single instant. The third, who was also running, looked back in terror. He decided to use the civilians as hostages to survive. However, when he turned, he realized everyone had vanished. His head was pierced, and he fell dead. His body and weapon remained motionless on the ground. He then commented that he didn't remember them, nor any camps with professionals like the three they had faced. The protagonist asked if they were still going to the destroyed location, but the officer answered no, as they already knew what had happened, and it would be too risky with so many people. One of the soldiers reported that the current problem was the vehicle having burned out from overspeeding, and the captain asked if it was broken. One of the civilians raised her hand, saying that if it was a mechanical issue, she could take a look. While she worked, smoke came out of the vehicle. One of the fighters was impressed by the young woman's agility and thought she was an experienced mechanic, but she revealed she was just a student, and she went on to praise everyone, especially the captain, for being amazing. The leader then asked the girl's name. She introduced herself as Evelyn Clark and said she dreamed of becoming the greatest mechanic of all time. With the help of the young mechanic Evelyn, the armored train began to move again. Soon after, having given up on entering Camp M2, the group began discussing their next destination, considering Camps L4 and Y5. Although Camp L4 was nearby, the monster invasion made it risky, so they decided to head to Camp Y5, which seemed safer even though the trip would take 5 days. However, Xiao Qiu insisted they go to L4, since Evelyn had informed them that the train had fuel for only 2 days, which wasn't enough to reach Y5. For Captain Jiang and her team, running out of fuel with civilians on board was unacceptable. Faced with that, they had no choice but to risk going to Camp L4. Consequently, the young man remained seated silent. Suddenly, the officer asked him why he was so insistent on going to that destination. Then she asked if he had already known about the fuel limitation, but got no response. At that moment, Xiao Ku recalled that Area Y, according to his memories from the previous world, was the first to fall completely, becoming the absolute domain of monsters despite all efforts. Meanwhile, the captain observed him carefully. Later, she wanted to know what kind of person, according to the news, had personally arrested him. Immediately, he replied that it was someone just. In response, the captain asked if he himself was truly just. She then fixed her gaze on him, thoughtful. In that moment, she considered that it truly matched what was said about the young man. In the distance, a monster with locust wings flew over the ruins. Suddenly, a dead human lay inside the body of a creature, collapsed on the ground. Soon after, 2 similar monsters took flight across the sky. Moments later, one of them was violently struck and began to bleed. However, a humanoid figure with locust-like features, holding a scythe, watched the scene attentively. The monster then uttered enigmatic words about the moon and the sun. Amidst the flames, it stood holding a piece of paper. A close-up revealed that its eyes contained multiple images of human faces. It then spoke the word humanity. Suddenly, its wings glowed with a green aura. Next, a bright blue bolt shot down from the sky and struck the ground. Then, a swarm of small locust-like creatures filled the skies. Meanwhile, the civilians inside the train were apprehensive. Soon, a man tried to reassure them, saying the route was safe and that with professional guides, they wouldn't attract attention. However, another individual looked out the window at the dark smoke cloud, wondering what had happened to Camp M2. Despite the attempt to stay calm, the passengers remained tense. Then, one of them realized it wasn't smoke at all. In fact, a vast swarm of flying monsters was covering the sky. Next, the humanoid monster flew surrounded by countless smaller creatures. Suddenly, a man called out to the captain, who said she had already seen this scene before. Thoughtfully, she considered that if the same enemy who killed the M2 commander was there, the group's survival to L4 was uncertain. The creature's reflection could be seen in the soldier's eyes. In turn, the monster's eyes reflected her face. The creature then reaffirmed its intention to exterminate humanity. Soon after, it grabbed one of the smaller creatures. Then it absorbed it in a brutal act of power. As a result, it grew in size and strength, with even larger wings. The monster then declared that humanity was its target. Next, it launched a powerful and swift attack. The impact was violent, causing a massive explosion. The officer wore a tense expression. Meanwhile, he also showed extreme exertion. His feet, planted firmly in the ground, resisted the tremendous pressure. Finally, the train stopped sliding. Evelyn was astonished to see that mass of 10,000 tons being pushed with such ease. Inside the vehicle, a man kept exclaiming how incredible it was. The captain then ordered everyone to defend the train, and the soldiers responded immediately. Right after, she called Evelyn, asking her to repair the wheels, check the system, and prepare for escape. The young woman responded promptly. Meanwhile, the leader reflected that the lives of the civilians were insignificant. What mattered most was not losing the train, because without it, they'd be trapped on the front line. Consequently, she concluded that only by saving the strongest could the future be secured. Captain Zhang remained standing, observing the vast horde of approaching monsters. Suddenly, a purple energy spear tore through the air. Immediately after, it flew swiftly toward a swarm of smaller monsters. Then, a powerful explosion of purple energy erupted in the sky. As a result, pieces of the creatures rained down. Soon after, Captain Zhang was seen among the flying monsters, gripping her weapon firmly. Next, a soldier questioned whether she was really just a 6th-level professional, doubting that someone of that level could be so powerful. Another soldier said that not even a 7th-level commander could pull off such feats so easily. Later, a third commented that although the officer was 6th level, that would soon change. In response, a comrade warned them to stop talking. It was time to deal with the remaining enemies. Meanwhile, the humanoid enemy triggered several fire explosions on the ground. Then, a civilian inside the train pointed, identifying the creature. He also said that was the monster responsible for the commander's death. The creature observed him silently, arms crossed. However, both Xiao Qiu and the captain took their positions, ready for combat, each holding their respective weapon. At that moment, the ground cracked violently from the impact of the officer's charge. Immediately after, she attacked the creature, which dodged with remarkable speed. Despite the offensive, the opponent remained unfazed, his eyes glowing intensely. Shortly after, the spear was thrust again, but it seemed to hit only a shadow. She then wondered if that was just an afterimage. Surprised, the fighter realized the enemy's incredible speed. He moved with such agility that he left visible trails in the air. Then he struck the ground, causing rocks to scatter violently. As a result, the captain became trapped in a crater created by the impact. Immediately, the soldiers called out to her, showing concern. At that moment, the monster flew at high speed, preparing a new attack. Its arm extended, emitting a bright green glow. The limb morphed into a long, sharp blade. Soon after, it slashed with the blade, aiming directly at the opponent. She managed to block the attack, her face showing great strain. Holding her weapon firmly, she resisted the strike with determination. Sparks flew at the point of collision between the blade and the spear. The captain's eyes widened at the strength of the clash. In the middle of the battle, small projectiles appeared, fired by an invisible force. Next, Xiao Qiu attacked, stomping the ground, while the woman held her defense. The trees in the background were sliced and toppled by the impact. Then she asked her ally if he was leaving. The young man stated that he would handle the situation and take care of the remaining monsters. Right after, someone questioned how he would manage that. She, concerned, warned him not to die. Next, the enemy was thrown backward, vanishing among the forest trees. It landed violently, cracking the ground beneath it. Swiftly, it regained balance and scanned the forest. A trail of destruction stretched through the fallen trees. The monster then looked at its opponent, stating that he was human. Then it said his scent was the same as the others, questioning his true nature. Xiao Ku responded by asking if he was being called a monster or a human. He then declared that he was neither. His sword then appeared, wrapped in a dark and menacing aura. Now he was surrounded by shadowy energy. He transformed into a demonic figure, stating it was more fitting to call him a monster. He declared that finally he could unleash his full power, speaking to Blood Crow. Shortly after, unease took over the insect-like creature upon seeing his transformation. Consequently, the enemy concluded it needed to strike first. It charged at incredible speed toward its opponent. Its hand came dangerously close to the young man's transformed body. However, he blocked the strike with his own face. The impact generated a shockwave so powerful it sent the monster flying backward. A cloud of dust and debris rose from the point of impact. Xiao Ku's new form was revealed, seemingly absorbing the enemy's energy. The creature's hand was still on the transformed face. He then asked if that was all the power the enemy had. The creature's eyes widened, completely shocked. Xiao Qiu assumed a firm stance, ready to strike. His punch caused a massive explosion in the heart of the forest. Finally, he declared that if that was all the other had, now it was his turn to attack. The monster was shaken by what it heard. Then, Xiao Qiu, in his monstrous form, prepared for battle. Suddenly, a powerful dark strike hit the insect creature. Next he rose, transformed and imposing, holding his weapon. After that, the monster known as Treacherous Wisdom lay defeated on the ground. Thus, the warrior's blade, Blood Crow, began its second evolution by absorbing the creature's blood. As a result, the sword became enveloped in green energy, showing its new phase. At that moment, a new glowing red eye appeared on the evolving blade. Soon after, the weapon completed its transformation, gaining the new ability Tide of Crows, capable of draining the blood of enemies. Satisfied, he looked at his sword and stated it had become stronger. Meanwhile, the ground was covered with the remains of the insect-like creatures, and a train stood in the background. Next, a soldier informed Captain Zhang that the sky was clear and there were no casualties among the people on the train. However, another soldier voiced concern for Xiao Qiu, wondering if he had sacrificed himself to drive the monster away. In response, Captain Zhang remained silent. Suddenly, a third soldier announced that the fighter had returned. He then appeared walking through a dark, wooded area. He continued on his path with his mask and sword. One of the soldiers asked if he had taken care of the monster, and the warrior confirmed. The bald soldier then expressed his surprise, noting that the creature had killed a 7th-rank commander and asked if his rank was higher. Next, something like a giant sword fell from the sky, slamming into the ground with force. Inside the train, Evelyn was tending to an injured man. Later, Captain Zhang and Xiao Qiu were sitting across from each other. At that moment, the officer thanked the warrior for what had happened. In response, he asked why she was thanking him. Captain Zhang explained that she was grateful for him saving her life, but the young man downplayed the deed. Soon after, she commented that his power was growing illogically, similar to the mask from the legends, quickly reaching a superhuman level. Shortly after, Evelyn approached the captain and Xiao Qiu, reporting a problem with the radio that was preventing contact with the nearest army camp. Then, Captain Zhang asked Evelyn to explain further, feeling that the problem wasn't just with the equipment. Evelyn then explained that the signals seemed to be blocked, preventing both sending and receiving messages. In conclusion, she stated that they had become an island. Next, the warrior's sword, charged with energy, glowed once more. Soon, he received the main quest, Monster Path, a sea of monsters, with the goal of exterminating a war led by a monster god to achieve partial evolution. Finally, the warrior's eye revealed that he was reflecting on the new mission. Meanwhile, the armored train continued on its path through the desolate landscape. Suddenly, a radio began to emit static sounds, followed by a voice trying to communicate. Shortly after, the soldiers heard the transmission becoming clearer, identifying it as a broadcast from the L4 Army camp requesting a response. Faced with this, Captain Zhang agreed with Evelyn about the earlier signal issue and suggested they respond to the communication first. Thus, Evelyn used the radio to report that her team from Camp N3, on a mission with an armored train full of rescued civilians, was attacked near Camp N2. The radio tower at Camp L4 confirmed they had received the message, lamented the fall of Camp M2, and requested they approach their camp for protection. Evelyn reported that they would arrive at Camp L4 in under 3 hours and that the armored train needed fuel, which would be replenished there. One of the men celebrated the chance to rest and take a hot shower, believing that at Camp L4, everyone could start over with safer defenses than those at M2. Suddenly, the radio began emitting static again, with an incomplete voice. Next, a message from the radio warned not to trust the signals sent by the L4 Army camp. One of them, visibly shocked, completed the sentence by saying that they were monsters. Faced with the revelation, Evelyn asked how it was possible for such creatures to be sending the signals, as they shouldn't have the intelligence to use radios or mimic human voices. Then Captain Zhang noted that there were many signs of monsters imitating humans, recalling the monstrous crocodiles in the sanctuary and the humanoid insects encountered earlier. She then picked up the radio to communicate. The officer then asked who it was and why they claimed the signals from Camp L4 were being sent by monsters. Soon, the voice on the radio reported that Camp L4 had fallen after a wave of powerful and intelligent monsters deceived everyone, killing the commander and 3 8th-level professionals. A soldier, shocked, commented that those professionals were considered heroes, and for 3 of them to have died at once was an extremely serious event. The radio, in turn, warned about the monsters' intelligence and the fall of the camp, asking not to trust them and pointing to a temporary survivor camp to the northeast. Meanwhile, the radio from Camp L4 continued broadcasting, requesting the armored train to approach for a meeting and to respond as soon as the message was received. Simultaneously, the voices of the survivors warned not to respond, while L4's insistent transmission kept requesting a reply. Amid the confusion, one man suggested going to the temporary camp, but Captain Jiang considered it unlikely that L4 had fallen without signs of a large monster wave. However, other civilians expressed doubts, asking if the temporary camp might be trying to deceive them and questioning how such a strategic center like L4 could have fallen. In the middle of the discussion, the officer remained silent. Finally, she turned to Xiao Q and asked for his opinion. With arms crossed, the warrior replied that they shouldn't go to either place. He then explained that both locations were traps. He realized that in his past life, the front lines fell quickly because monsters illuminated by treacherous wisdom had gained human intelligence. Guided by cunning beings, those monsters tricked and used humans as hunting dogs, catching humanity off guard and conquering vast areas of land. The young man remembered that, in that previous life, Central Camp L4 held out until the human counterattack and didn't fall so soon. Without the control of the demon god Treacherous Wisdom, he had saved energy and created a sea of monsters, starting an unprecedented war in his past life. Thus, Xiao Ku reflected that the entire world was moving in an uncertain direction, wondering whether this change would be good or bad. However, he concluded that no matter how bad it turned out, it couldn't possibly be worse than the end of the previous world. As the fuel of the armored train would only last for 4 hours, the group, facing a difficult situation, decided to head toward the temporary camp. Upon reaching the designated coordinates, they spotted a camp that appeared to have been built by humans. Soon after, those who received them were indeed survivors from Camp L4, but there was something different about them. In reality, they had already become accomplices of the monsters, who forced them to lure other teams there in exchange for their lives. However, before they could attack, Xiao Q had already eliminated them all with his ability. Despite the swift cleanup of the camp, the 4 members brought by Evelyn Clark to trade supplies were killed. Even though the group didn't blame her, the young woman felt deeply guilty. She also reflected on how humanity was turning against itself. After collecting supplies, they headed toward Camp A1, fearing it had already been overtaken. Captain Jiang, her face masked, held a book in her hands, lost in thought. Her red eyes, visible behind the mask, showed intense concentration. She then reported that Camp L4 had lost communication simultaneously, which possibly led to its downfall. Xiao Q concluded that the monsters were acting in an organized and intelligent manner. The officer then asked whether the monsters had really gained intelligence and strategies, to which the young man confirmed, explaining that a portion of them had indeed become intelligent. He added that, unlike other monster gods, the treacherous wisdom used cunning and subordinates that mimicked humans to exterminate them. He also described this entity as devious, well-disguised, and rarely showing its true form, mentioning that even in previous encounters, it had never revealed its real body. At that moment, the captain praised Xiao Q's knife, which he revealed was called Flying Crow, a gift from a friend. She commented that he must have had a very good friend, and he agreed, while wondering whether Yan Cixi would still consider him a friend as she knew he had killed Yan Canli. Meanwhile, a woman was accusing him of being a monster, claiming that his friend might have recovered and questioning his actions. Faced with the accusation, the young man reflected that he had faced many similar situations, and no matter how much one pondered, some questions led only to dead ends without answers. Suddenly, a gust of wind and dust swept through the area. A soldier asked what was going on, while another ordered everyone to look outside. Then the captain grabbed her binoculars to get a better view. Soon a large cloud of dust rose on the horizon, from which enormous monsters began to emerge, kicking up even more debris. In the sky, a large number of flying creatures soared above. She observed and reported that the monsters were heading toward Camp A1, the same direction they were going. One of the soldiers asked how many there were, estimating thousands. Suddenly, another soldier pointed outside, drawing the officer's attention. A line of armored vehicles was quickly advancing across the terrain, opening fire with red projectiles. Shortly after, powerful explosions hit the creatures, dissolving their forms. In the sky, more explosions occurred among the flying monsters. The captain remarked that splitting the vehicles to lure the monsters with artillery and attacking them was an interesting tactic, making it seem like victory was only a matter of time. But then, a long, dark projectile swiftly crossed the field of vision. A soldier expressed relief, saying that finally someone was on their side. Soon, a man approached the group, introducing himself and saying they came from Camp N3. A large weapon was aimed at them, while the soldiers from the vehicles ordered them not to move, aiming their guns. Captain Zhang, Xiao Q, and another member showed surprise at the reaction. Another soldier, holding a knife, watched them closely. One of them questioned the approach, stating they were not enemies, but was met with a strict order to remain still under threat of execution. He tried to justify their effort to make it that far, but was accused of betrayal, especially since they hadn't been attacked by monsters, with his explanations ignored. However, Leader Liang intervened, asking for calm and stating that he recognized them. The leader, leaning on his cane, kept his eyes closed and wore a serene expression. Camp 81, formerly a prison and known as the Redemption Camp, had been secretly modified to house traitorous humans suspected of arriving from outside groups. Many survivors who reached the place were placed in quarantine, as without means to identify traitors, everyone was treated as a suspect. Given the situation, the leader stated that because of all this, it must have been very difficult for them to make it that far. Leader Liang called Captain Zhang, informing her that Camp N3 had already been evacuated before the monsters' arrival and traps had been set to contain the enemies. She remained silent for a moment and then commented that the situation truly seemed serious, since otherwise, the superiors would not have abandoned cities built with so much effort. The commander explained that traitors working for the monsters had sabotaged several camps, including A1, thus justifying the quarantine imposed on the newcomers. Understanding the reason, the officer stated that she would have done the same. Soon after, she asked why some creatures had developed intelligence, to which the leader replied that without this transformation, the losses on the front lines would have been much smaller. Thoughtful, he suggested that the monster gods were the source of these changes and admitted he knew little about it, implying that she might have the answers. Additionally, he informed her that the captain would be investigated for a few days, and if found innocent, would receive a new mission, since with the shortage of personnel, every person was valuable. Still behind bars, the officer stared intently at Leader Leon. With a questioning tone, she repeated, "I might know .. The answer to all of this?" After a moment, she looked away, immersed in deep thoughts. Shortly after, she and Xiao Q were taken to a cell equipped with beds and tables. Curious, she asked what the young man was analyzing on the map, and he said he suspected that a nearby mountain with a hot spring could be an extinct volcano. She agreed that this possibility was plausible. With a mask covering his face, the young man maintained a serious expression. Then, a new supply shipment arrived due to the unprecedented wave of monsters on the front lines, with several Federation members present, including Congressman Song Ming. A politician gave a speech, encouraging the fighters not to fear the monsters' offensive, as the Federation had prepared everything properly. Despite the battle's tension, Zhang noticed that the Federation's group was concerned with showing off, but acknowledged that their presence on the front lines was positive. Soon after, a soldier reported that the quarantine and investigation had been cancelled, as they would be sent to command full squads on the front lines. He then ordered that, after receiving their orders, they quickly gather in the designated area to attack on the same day, also requesting that they identify their weapons. One of them was a long staff. The officer remained silent for a moment, and then questioned whether the situation on the front lines had deteriorated so much that they were being sent into battle without even verifying their reliability. Then Xiao Ku requested to appoint Evelyn Clark as his aide, to which the soldier replied that he would arrange it, asking them to follow him to the meeting point to identify the team. Meanwhile, two men in prison uniforms observed the movement. Soon, Jiang and the young man were taken to a group of people also wearing inmate uniforms. Surprised, the captain confirmed that this was the Redemption Camp. The soldier explained that, as a last resort, only they remained. He countered by saying that the camp had poor combat skills, low morale, and did not follow orders, questioning the usefulness of so many members, and highlighting that precisely because they were so many. Trying to reassure them, the soldier held a box and asked them not to worry. He explained that the investigators had eliminated the monster's electronic interference, allowing instant communication within a 3-kilometer radius, with one communicator for every group of 10. Xiao Q stated that these devices would make the situation more convenient, and the soldier agreed, saying he would lead the group with them, granting them the privilege of choosing their destination on the map. The officer indicated that the situation in the northwest perimeter was critical, as the monsters were concentrating their attacks there, recommending that they choose that area. In response, the young man stated that they would go there, while the captain showed surprise. The man asked where they were going. Next, he questioned whether Xiao Qiu had understood that the chosen region was dangerous, with 3 sides controlled by monsters and only one sector still resisting, nearly overrun. The young man acknowledged the area's danger, justifying his choice. In response, the man demanded 20 military maps, miniature nuclear devices, and tripwire explosives as payment. Soon after, Captain Zhang intervened, instructing him to listen carefully and confirming that this was indeed the chosen region. Faced with this, he seemed perplexed, trying to process the situation. Despite his hesitation, he ended up agreeing, albeit reluctantly. He only asked that they not regret the plan and promised to try to provide the requested items, instructing the group to head to the transport fleet as soon as the team was identified. Next, the captain wanted to know if Xiao Qiu intended to put the criminals from the camp in a desperate situation so that they would follow his orders. He confirmed. However, Zhang considered the idea risky. She argued that even if they were forced to fight without choice, they wouldn't be able to withstand so many monsters and would end up quickly annihilated. In light of the warning, Xiao Qiu remained silent. Meanwhile, Evelyn observed them and stated that the outcome would depend on the combined effort of both. 2 hours later, the young woman expressed despair, stating that they were all going to be killed. She emphasized that, being only them and criminals from the redemption camp, it would be impossible to hold out in the fiercest part of the front line. However, Xiao Qiu replied that if they didn't try, they would never know the outcome. At that moment, one of the prisoners, carrying a device, commented that they should be able to install it. Then Xiao Qiu handed over a map, instructing Evelyn to follow the marked locations and install the devices together with Jiang Ling. The criminals, in turn, stared at him with defiant expressions. Thus, he began walking toward the group. Soon after, he stated that he was satisfied with the look in their eyes, but one of them, furious, asked if Xiao Qiu was looking to die. The man, pointing a weapon, said they had already cooperated enough in the prison and that he should behave. He then smiled and suggested they let him go, in exchange for enjoying the 2 girls. At that moment, Zhang's eyes, watching the scene, burned with pure rage. Suddenly, her purple spear flew toward the criminal. Immediately, the man showed shock and panic. Moments later, he collapsed unconscious, surrounded by purple lightning. Then the captain asked Xiao Qiu if he would mind her killing one of them. He replied that he had no objections, but asked that next time she not ask for forgiveness instead of permission.
Our video ends here. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye bye.